Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. I see so many of you all here safely. Some of you might be wondering why we changed location and came into the bunker in the basement here.
You like the view better.
It is for your own. Trust me, for your own auditory benefit. I'm not referring to the music right now. I'm referring to music that is going to be emanating shortly from outside the global hub. Today is a very important day in the student life of Northwestern University. It's called Dillo Day. And it's a day where students, especially undergraduates, decide that they're going to do all kinds of festivities on campus.
Nosh, it's a day of debauchery. Let's be honest.
My question.
How
do we go?
Just out the back, you know? Yeah. And as a result, there was concern that songs and music and what some would consider music and others may not might emanate if you were up on the fourth floor. So we were advised to hunker down in the basement here. So one of the reasons we are today. But on your way out, you will probably see glimpses of this, and some of you, if you're walked in, you will see glimpses of students already on the front. Anyway, we are here. There's no debauchery in this room here. We're all here today. Another fabulous session to continue from our conversations yesterday. And again, I want to make sure that all of our visitors who come to us from elsewhere have picked up their little goodie bag. And you see that just as Brian was previewing yesterday, the book by Julio. Julio has autographed the book that you have in your little gift bag. And you delighted to be able to do that. Thank you again for coming, and this is just a small appreciation. I'm going to hand things over now to Liz, who's going to chair our session this morning, followed by the panel, and then I'm going to say this because this is the last time I'll probably get a chance to see all of you. Thank you all so much for coming. I have to go teach a class. And so my class ends at 12:30, which is exactly when this workshop ends. So I know that Brian and Marlon are going to do a great job of helping wrap everything up, etc. So from me, just thank you again all for coming, and I hope to see some of you at future ANN-SONIC and other events, ANN-SONIC-NICO, and other events moving forward. Yes, Liz.
Round of applause. Beautiful. Thank you. So I decided to take over this session. Have the other instruments ready? Yeah. We're not running of course. I got to play conductor last night. Thank you all for surviving to that music. I'm absolutely honored to be here. I'm particularly excited because I happen to know two of the topics. The first two are fresh off the presses. I know not even at the press yet. They are new ideas that are being worked out, and I just was so amazed by the respectful commentary we had, particularly around Melissa Valentine's talk yesterday when she was presenting ideas and really working through those. So I'm looking forward to celebrating our scholars today. So first up, we have our local Hei Jing, who hails from the fifth floor of this building. Who will be giving a talk, and I'll let.
Thank you.
Each speaker will be speaking for about 30 minutes with 15 minutes of questions.
Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. Today I would like to talk about something that I've been working on, and very new, and there are things that I just produced last week, so it's pretty fresh. Some of them are posted the preprint in a month ago, but most of things are really, really new. And I'm so happy to present the new direction of my research today. Okay, today because I heard the presentation yesterday, I would like to, my talk is going to be slightly different in a sense that it's going to be a little bit more scale up and looking at the entire ecosystem of human skills. And lastly, I would like to throw in the technology, how the technology actually participate and occupy the the landscape I created, a landscape of the skills, human skills I created. So to begin with, I just give you some idea. I just provide you some context of how I think about the complex economy and why I'm looking at the data and the research direction I'm taking. So to begin with, I just want to share this short excerpt from Korean show, which was very, very popular. Some of you may know the My Love from the Star. That was like extremely popular even in Korea, like outside in China. But I just got this to show you what happened. It's a Korean costume in the really, really past, and how Korea actually changed dramatically the landscape over the past 50 years. So, having said that, the world economy, not only just Korea overall, has increasingly complex. Their productivity and goods and services and infrastructure and all. This is like what modern economy. And I'd like to understand, like this is like how I understand the modern economy. From the beginning that we hunt and gather, and today we become so specialized and focusing on certain things that we are looking at the very specialized knowledge. Now, so the way I understand is following. The complexity, when we think about so much complexity we have to produce, then it is obvious that we are under the extreme pressure to become so specialized and yet have to possess a diverse skill sets to accomplish this, to produce something that is very complex. So there are two things, defining characteristics in the modern economy. On one hand, there is a diverse skill sets and diverse the services and products. On the other hand, they are so much specialized. How can I reconcile these two defining characteristics of modern economy? That sounds like a huge thing, but I'm going to go like a little bit more depth into. So, okay, so just to recap, people and firms seem to be very specialized in different activities. And by doing that, economy, efficiency, and productivity increases, which is great. So what we can observe, whether this is true, like we can observe like how many activities increases over the time, or occupation increases over time, number of products increases over time, number of industries increases over time. It's always increasing, like we are from our experience and experience and also common knowledge. And interaction increases over time because all these specialized efforts have to be coordinated to produce something new. So increasing we have more increasing interaction, not only just the social interaction, but also like the economy itself actually complex economy puts so much pressure to be interacted, to produce the global networks, to produce something that is very, very complex. And that actually increases the coordination cost. So if you look at the coordination cost and the number of conflicts increases more time, conflict resolutions, and the coordinations is so regulations, the cost of regulation increases over time. So that's how I understand it. So let's just I have a big project on the coordination cost, and we're looking at how the coordination cost increases and what structure look like, under what condition. That's one thing I've been working on. I'd like to share it, hopefully in the next 2 years. On the other hand, I'm just looking at how the specialization happened to increase the productivity. Now, when I think about the specialization, on one hand, this Adam Smith's specialization, we actually divided this our efforts and tasks into such a small way so that we can routinize and produce something that is in a repetition. So we can increase our productivity. But that actually decreases our skill sets. Which loses we lose our bargaining power. It's something like the de-skilling. It's increasing our skills to produce something that is like a pin factory. Like there's the really simple task, so that we do repetition, so that we increase our number of the pins we produce. However, on the other hand, because the skills that are required are so simple, anyone can do, that actually that decrease our bargaining power, so we become cheap. On the other hand, there is another specialization going on, that we become so specialized in a certain knowledge and certain production that we become very unique. What's going on in between too? So let me just one step back and think about what's going on. In the past, this is the first stone tool. Technology has changed so dramatically over this human history. This is the first stone tool our ancestor dabbled. To make it, it doesn't look like a technology, but this is a kind of technology to make it sharp so that we can cut and chop different woods. That technology, does this technology require the specialization? That's the question I'm asking. Yes and no. No, in a sense that I can make it myself. Even now, I can make it by I was going outside and pick up the stone and I just sharpen, and so I can make it. However, I can make it much better and more productive by bringing team together, and one person goes out and find out this it's the right size of a stone and right hardness of a stone. Me just getting the stone and just sharpening. So division of labor actually increases productivity, even this simple technology. On the other hand, if I look at the iPhone, this is the first iPhone. Can I make this iPhone myself? How many people can make this iPhone? So my PhD is in physics, proudly. So I was like, okay, I can make it. So I went to internet and trying to see whether I can make a cell phone. This is a step number one, how to make a cell phone. So order the circuit board and the soldering the electrode. I learned it from my past, and upload the software and using the phone and laser cut and all there are things. And then what the thing is then when I was trying to follow these steps, and then I realized, well, I ordered the circuit board. Okay, where to begin to make a circuit board? And then to do that, a silicon. How can I make a silicon? Okay, in principle, yes, I can make a silicon. I just go outside and collect the sand and and with the furnace, and I can make it in principle, but I can't. Why? It's become so complex and it requires more devices. So now, and then again, I realized, okay, to make it the silicon, I need to make a fire, and how can I make a fire? So all these things, it's these days, making anything, any single technology, it requires so much effort of collaboration or coordination of a specialization of the knowledge and tasks. So that actually put me wondering, maybe this complexity, that actually made this different types of division of labors we got into. Now the question is why? Why I cannot make an iPhone myself? This is because as a human is limited. On one hand, I've been trained to study scaling-free, power law and scaling-free behavior. But in a human itself, myself, I have a finite size of physiological capacity, and I have a finite life cycle. And so I have a finite size of the brain. So there are limited capacity of the physiological and the cognitive capacity. I'm confined. And now that sometimes some people call it the person bite. So we are limited person bite. We have a limited person bite. That actually kept the capacity or capability of producing something more than needed. Something that more produce something that is enough to produce, that is required by the increasingly complex society, increasingly complex economy. So as a result, it is true, the knowledge to produce iPhone requires more than more than what we can handle. So this is Ben Jones's work. Our colleagues was looking at the ages, the ages of the innovations or the patent producers increasing over time, and the jumping from one field to another decreasing. This is average inventors going up. So it's like the PhDs, and it requires more time to observe this knowledge, and there is only so much we can learn our lifetime. So this is still conjecture of mine. I feel like, okay, maybe this is the reason why we have two different direction of the specialization that actually may produce this inequality or disparity across this labor market. Now, this is one way of thinking of. I'm more interested in this particular talk. I would like to discuss how we can become valuable workers in this complex economy, in these pressures that require this specialization of different kinds. So, one, when I look at myself, if I just recollect myself, when I specialize, I require, there is a certain path to become specialized. Sometimes we call it pedagogy. Sometimes we call it the career path. So, for example, if I wanted to learn physics, now I can't really learn physics from the beginning when I don't know how the calculus work. I have to learn calculus. This is a prerequisite. The calculus requires arithmetics. So there are certain paths we have to go through. It's not the specialization that is the collection of acquisition of different skills randomly. There are some paths exist in already society. So I'd like to understand this. So some of paths are very well embedded in our curriculum. So if you are coming from university, this is how we learn. Now, not every skills have this path, this nested structure. I call it nested structure because it seems to be nested onto each other, or some skills are built on the other skills. Let me get the water. But some skills don't need this is the dependency structures. Maybe I can learn some skills randomly, but some skills require some prerequisites. If I want to learn this, then I have to learn something else. So there are skills that are nested, there are skills that are not nested, and also skills depend on each other. So can I actually construct the skills that and then identify these two different classification of skills? One is nested skills, or skill sets that are depending on each other. Some skills are not nested, which can be learned immediately. That actually that allows this kind of a way of structuring skill. Allows me to understand why the specialization requires diversification as well as the depth of learning. So on one hand, it's a depth that I have to learn, go through. On the other hand, the breadth, diversifications. So these two things can be captured in this framework. Now, how can I construct this structure, skill structure? So I just look at how the skills are distributed across occupations. Some skills are required to many different occupations. Some skills are required to only few occupations. Those skills that are more specialized skills, those skills that are needed broadly across different occupations, are skills that are pretty much maybe general. So now, once I do that, now I just go back to this person byte, the limited person byte concept. So even the skills are structured in such a way to be needed to be used in the complex economy. We mortal human, cannot actually acquire all skills at the same time. So we have to actually cover it like this, maybe some bits, some few skills, and few skills have to be kind of related to each other in this dependency network, because otherwise you can't really go through the learning path. So this is how I understand. Once I construct a skill structure like this, then I I could start to think about myself, like how these occupations covered this skill structure. Or reversely speaking, if I observe the skills occurred in occupation, each occupation, maybe it's possible to construct this skill structure, network structure. So this is the network structure. This is something that I'm interested in this talk. So again, recap. So if this is like synthetic kind of imaginary structure I have, and the occupations cover this, and once I know this, the observations of skill occurrences across occupations, then distribution, then I can see that what skills are more fundamental in a sense that is prerequisite to many different skills, and what structures are more like randomly appeared, what structures actually depend on each other. So for example, if the skills are very much specialized, then the usage don't happen much, like in the lower bound here, and only some occupation, small number of occupation will have a high level of skills, the skill of our interest. Fundamental skill, maybe something like a very much fundamental that appears so much different occupations. So now see whether this is actually the case. Now I'm going to get into the empirics.
I was just going to ask, could you give an example?
Oh, empirics will give you an example. Let me just get the empirics. Because I'm going to actually look at the actual data. So what empirics I'm looking at is ONET. ONET is a survey data in the U.S. labor economy, the labor statistics, and they look at the thousands of occupations across each occupation, ask around what kind of skills are needed for this occupation. And this is a snippet of the data set. So for example, the chiropractors here needs the 1.5 level of reaction time. Maybe needs more than 1.5. Chief executive requires the 5.5 level of management and financial resources. Dishwasher quality control analysis, 2 level. Chief executives, again, personnel and human resources skills. Chiropractors, active listening. Oh, it says higher than this. So all these things are the examples. And of course, we have the thousands of the survey results. From there, now, we are looking at this number, the levels. What's the level of the skills that is needed for this occupation? Okay? And I look at the distribution.
Okay. I was just trying to get a sense of what you meant by nesting with a concrete.
Oh, that we will get there.
And unnested.
No, it's going to be mathematically defined in 3 slides. Can we wait? Or?
Continue. Sorry.
No. It's because it's not easy to identify nestedness. I want to be very careful defined because my definition may not be right. So I actually use a lot of different evidences to see whether this is right. But still, yeah.
Okay, I could just say it's a conceptual question. So it's not just a data question.
Oh yes, please, yes.
So I'm asking you to elaborate on what you mean with a concrete example or something. I'm having a little difficulty understanding the nested structure versus the accidental collection of skills that seems to underlie this. I'm not able to listen, but that's the point of the question.
So are the skills that are needed for concept
abstractions is a nested skill.
Say that again?
Understanding abstractions is a nested skill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this is an abstraction.
No, please, I only have 10 minutes, so let's just come back to that if it is not answered. Because I don't want to say some conceptual answer yet, because it's going to be very narrowly structured, narrowly defined. So just to wait a little bit. So okay, so for example, I use it step by step. So for example, if I look at the skills that are the fine art, it is mostly most of occupation don't need the fine art skill much. Only few skills needed, occupations needed. English is language, for example, the other example, is needed across many different occupations at the relatively high level. there is something in between psychology, like understanding psychology, knowledge skills is in between. Now I classify the skills based on this shape. Some shape that is skewed, that are not required many different occupations, most of occupation don't need, are classified as specific skills. Skills that are needed most likely, the most of occupations are classified as general skills. I allowed something in between, immediate, but I actually generate, this is like came in clustering kind of things. But I actually changes this classification number so that my finding is actually robust to what I'm, the number of the classification groups. Now, coming back to the little bit like this, let me just go step by step. Given this, I just have some mathematical hypothesis that the specific skills should be in this hierarchical structure, should be in the leaves of the trees, as opposed to general skills in the root of the tree. Of course, some skills don't need the general skills. Maybe just because they are randomly appear. So let me just go one by one. How the nestedness is constructed. Because there are the dependency of the occurrence of the skills. Some skills appear, and the other skills is actually somehow dependently appear. So for example, if I compare between two skills of the mathematical skills and programming, the chances that I just look at the conditional probability, chances that, here is a binder, chances that I see biology as a programming skill, the chances that biology has the mathematical skill is higher than the chances that I see myself a mathematical skill, then what's the chance that I have a programming skill? There is an asymmetric of these occurrences that it creates, that provides us this directionality in these co-appearances, from which I can make a directed network with all possible number of pairs of skills across these occurrences. This is the final result. I call it hierarchy and nested skills. So nested is like, again, like, no, I don't have much of the conceptual yet. I only have this definition, this mathematical operational definition, that if I find some skill, conditional on the other skill, is the higher than the other way around, there is a direction. And of course, I use a lot of statistical significance of tests. So many of the links that co-appears, appears a lot, but they may not show the significant directionality, then I just omit in this network structure. Now, so the nodes are colored according to the classification. The classification of the skill distribution, as you remember the previous slide, the skills that present in only few occupation as opposed to many occupation are colored blue on the leaves of this tree. The skills that appeared so many times and across different occupation are colored red, and something in between. Now, obviously, if you know the mathematical, a little bit like statistics, or a little bit of the one-on-one of statistics, you could imagine the expected, how much time is going on? Am I doing?
I'm doing math really quickly in my head, 5 minutes.
Okay. So the skills that are classified general that appear so many different occupations, that means it has more chance to become the higher conditional probability. So it is obvious that you can see that the broad range, broad distribution, broad shape distribution of the skills are on the top. The narrow distribution or skew distribution on the bottom, and something between. Now, one thing I noticed is that some skills are more highly tightly binded with the group of skills called classified as general skills. Some skills are a little bit out there. And these skills are the skills that are a little bit more tightly binded with, strongly binded with the general skills are those, we often call high skill, high knowledge needed skills, like mathematical skills, programming, science, fine art, physics, that requires this pedagogy of the prerequisites, as opposed to skills that are called low level skills of dynamic flexibility, repairing, mechanicals, engineering in between, are somehow is a little bit apart from this large clustering, tightly knitted clustering. So with that, I was wondering, like, what's the implication of this structure? So, first of all, I would like to kind of hand-waving definition of the nestedness and unnestedness here. The skills that are pretty much like more tightly binded to the general skills, I classify as nestedness, and skills that are a little bit more like a little bit the loosely connected to the general skills are unnested. That's my definition. This is like an operational definition so far. Now, with that, I classified, again, like first slide, I classified the 3 different skills, general to the specific. Now, I further classified the skills into 2 different categories, nested and unnested. And here are the list of those. And now I want to test whether this classification works pretty well. So I look at the programming, which is considered to be nested classification, and I just look at the random walks and how this random walks to the focal here. The colors of node follow the likelihood of the starting from the focal skill, any focal skill to the target skills. Target skill here is programming, and how this is connected to the general skill. Since those skills that are on the right-hand side is classified as unnested, are not really well knitted. So now, given the interest of time, I would like to bring a little bit of the up to speed of this cross-sectional temporal evolution. So so far, we just look at the snapshot of how the skills occur, the distribution of skill occurrences. I just look at how this actually happens across the occupation age, your resume, and the age cohort survey, and 3 different data sets. The first data set is just looking at the survey of the people. It's a full survey, but it doesn't have a good the additional data set. Second was CPS. This is the current survey. Current population survey, which actually gives a pretty nice synthetic cohort. The final one is a burning glass technology, which doesn't give the more detail, and yet it has the resume detail of the ages and all to make the same graph of the 2 different the panels above. But this data doesn't give you the ages. I don't have data of the age, so I only know the differences of the skill acquisition. Now, how this is made? This is how this is made. So myself, resume, I came from physics. I was surrounded by economists for some time, and then I become part of the social science. and then I just look at what the skill sets have changed. The delta, I just calculate the delta according to the ONET. These are the things. I lost my physics. Oh, this is minus physics skills and speaking and all. I'm still learning. So with this, all the deltas, I just calculate nested, unnested, and how delta increases over time. Every millions of the resume. And you can see the general skills increases, and as we become more specialized, of course, the intermediate skills and specific skills increases over time. And the correlations of which skills are the correlated with the other skills increasing. Of course, general skills and the nested skills go hand in hand, as opposed we are losing the unspecific skills, unnested specific skills. Now, what's the implication of that? 1 minute? Yes, good. Okay. What's the implication of nested, nested and unnested specific skills I identified? I look at the wage premium, and of course, obviously, like unnested specific skills are more about labors, the manual labors. They actually go to less wage premium, as opposed to your specialization in the knowledge workers becomes higher wage premium for your investment. However, this is an interesting thing. I would just pause it. I will just move along because of the interest of time. But when I control general skills, everything that is actually most of it disappear. So it seems like general skills is important. I want to just emphasize because this is like the kind of implication of why university has to teach general skills. I have my own like personal interest on this. So we also look at the how this actually the structure changes over time. It seems like it changes. It used to be a nested skill, and non-nested skill seems to be more tightly bounded in the 15 years ago. Over the few decades, it seems to be more wider, broader. It actually concerned me. Now, I just gone in, and because of this like technology at work, this is the final slide. So, like what happens between this integrated network structure to the disintegrated network structure? So I was just wondering whether technology actually plays any role in this disparity of this structure. So I just throw the technology, how the technology is used in the different occupations. For example, an artist uses a microphone and computer software, or the mechanics need this. And I throw them and see what happens. Remember, the blue is human skills. That is exactly the same structure that you saw in the previous slide. Now I throw the technologies, and where the technology is located, I find the technology is actually located in between two different branches. And I'm just wondering whether it's going to increase or decrease, or whether this technology enables us to go from the nested and nested, or disabled or barrier between nested and nested skill acquisition. So this is done by my first author is a graduate student, and to my co-authors, thank you very much.
I think you may have also justified the English major. Did you not?
No.
Getting an English major?
No. I wish I did.
Okay.
That was dream.
So, there we go.
Oh,
This is a acyclic anti-symmetrical graph that's also weighted, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I guess you use some kind of a hierarchical decomposition to show the levels. I wonder how robust is this to misclassified, omitted, or wrongly collapsed categories? Because if you change one link in a hierarchical system, you might have a drastically different grouping and layout.
I think it is a valid question. So I try to test a number of different absence and presence of tests, and also I complement this the structure I see with data set I have with other data set, like in the burning glass data set, and what else but I'm still working on it. To be honest, there is no good answer. I mean, in ideal world, of course, I want to have an ideal data set that I just follow everyone and what did you learn and what year and for what occupation. That would be the ideal, but I only have patches of data set, and also and it's not complete. So you're absolutely right. There was one.
So this picture of nestedness explains the growing gap between low-skilled job and high-skilled job. But the other trend we've seen over the past, let's say, 40 years is polarization of labors. That the middle-skilled jobs are shrinking. How does that fit into this picture? Why are the middle-skilled jobs disappearing?
Yeah, that's exactly what you saw. The skill structure 20 years ago was more tightly bounded. Like the network structure looked like more like the triangle. But the 2 decades later, it becomes like this polarized. And then one thing that is still like on the way to the finding, the technology actually went into these two distinctive branches that polarized in different directions. So I'm still working on it. I just don't take it too much from me at the moment, but I find it very interesting.
questions.
Good. We have? Oh, yes.
Hi, very interesting talk. You're looking at the changes that occur over time, and yet for the skills are not fixed. That is, skills decline. Those skills are no longer needed. They go out of existence. New ones come in. I didn't see that you incorporated that aspect of the evolution in your design. And maybe you can point out what I missed or indicate how you might try to include that in as you're going along here.
You're absolutely right. There are two temporal. I was just like moving so fast. There are two temporal evolution I was looking at. One is temporal evolution of your like myself, like resume, and how the skills are changing across my resume. But it is true that this particular skill may change. But the thing is, like here, okay, that's one thing. The other one, actually looking at the temporal evolution, is how the skill structure looked like in the past 20 years ago, and now as is. And because the skills that are required for the occupation changed over time, the structure becomes more widened. And the technology comes in to fill this gap between the two different types of skill sets. Now, another question, the one that I was going to say is that the skills themselves don't change. The classification don't change. May increase or they may be demanded more and demanded less in occupation so that they are not used anymore. But classification themselves are relatively robust. Occupation, however, what occupation does under the same name changes drastically over the time. Bank teller, for example, used to be your ATM, not anymore. Or the personal assistant used to do the ABC, but not anymore, the CDE. So there are things like occupation, what occupation means and what occupation does under the same level may change. But skill themselves is relatively, the different time scale of the dynamics. And we are relatively safe, but at the same time, we are actually looking at the little bit long time, the historical data at the moment, but this historical data is still requires a manual collections. But it is actually true. But different, I just want to emphasize different time scale of dynamics, and the time scale dynamics that we are looking at is relatively like the occupation changes faster than the skill.
Brian has a question.
Oh, yes.
Hey, hi, Jen. Lots of provocative stuff in there. I'm sure when you get it all together, it's going to be very exciting. And build on what it's already like really got people's attention. I've got a question that relates to Balazs and Peter. You know, from a network analyst point of view, when they hear the word nestedness, it's really a very strong measure of the robustness of a network. So ecologists study, the structure of ecological networks, always using this idea of nestedness. And so when you started to talk about nestedness, one thing that came to my mind is you could imagine a way to introduce the impact of AI into this nested structure, because if AI starts to substitute skills that were done by humans, and if you were to take them out of the network might lose its robustness and create a lot of different disruptions. Now, predictions about that, I think, would be very exciting.
That's
so
actually
I bring
really...
it up only as a conceptual thing to think about.
This is actually a really good way of thinking. I only saw the visualization, how does the technology and the new technology come into this filling the gap between two, but I didn't actually think about the instability of the network structure due to this nestedness structure and the substitution of nested with a non-human element. That's I don't have operational the research design at the moment, but I may want to talk to you.
Sure, absolutely.
Right.
I am just down the hall.
Yes. Hey.
You could also tie this back to Schumpeter's work.
What's it?
I said you could also tie it back to Schumpeter's work on the disintegration that comes by technological innovation.
Absolutely. That's great.
Okay, let's have a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
And now, next up is Sabine. We went from the fourth floor of this building to 2.5 hours away, Purdue. So from Haley, 3 hours, at least 5 hours.
One more.
100 hours by
Took me 3 to get.
Sabine, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to just carry that. Can you hear me? Okay, so, and my tag says Northwestern, wishful thinking.
Yay.
I was visiting, so but I didn't do this, so I'm just going to carry it. First, I would like to thank the organizers, Nosh, still here, no, Brian, they all left, and also the others, other speakers for all these insightful, inspirational talks yesterday and also this morning. When Nosh asked me to speak, I was thinking, how can I make a contribution to AI and social networks? Because I do a lot of work on networks, network analytics, mining large big data set, but that's not necessarily, how you would think of AI in social networks as an active agent. But then I have some ongoing work which is about AI in human teaming and AI in teams and groups where AI is an active agent. And there we use neural networks. So I think with the neural network, I cover the network and look into teaming in groups, not necessarily looking into network techniques and network theories. And I think it relates to what we've seen yesterday. So if you talk about human AI teams or groups where AI plays a role, the question is, how do we make sure that we create a symbiotic relationship, that they support each other? It was also a key topic yesterday during the talk. So what I want to do, briefly a little bit about the reason why I'm focusing on social intelligence, and then presenting 2 ongoing studies, and if there's time, also an outlook on some of the work we're doing at Purdue at my center related to cognitive engineering and neurotech for AI-enabled shared intelligence. That relates a lot to the talk yesterday from Paul, and maybe there's time for it. So let me see how it goes. You have to just keep track of my time because I didn't really practice. So you said you finished last week. I think we finished yesterday. I'm not done.
Even fresher.
So, yeah. Okay, so I run a research center out of Purdue, and we're interdisciplinary. I'm interdisciplinary trained, and we're just excited about digital technologies because they allow new ways of bringing together human and artificial intelligence. And, artificial intelligence has been a term that's been around for a long time. Simon has already coined it. So, even if you have a DevOps system and open source software, which is basically testing whether you can integrate software, you have some machine intelligence. We've actually been dealing for this for a long, long time. Well, I think what's interesting nowadays is that we have machine learning and we have, intelligence that learns from data in real world, and the goal is really to increase also the intelligence of the systems. I got really excited about UAVs the last years, and the reason is a little bit maybe also personal background. My first kind of job was in aviation, come from a pilot family, and I just want to mention because we got also some research fellowship there. I've just hired a PhD, and we have another postdoctoral fellowship related to human autonomy teaming in the UAV context, where they're increasingly using actually machine learning on board to make the system more autonomous and not just automated, because otherwise it would be rule-based. Well, how do I use AI and machine learning? On one hand, looking, or my team, I would say, as I have to, we really work as a team to look at, complex data structures, or actually where AI becomes something that you study using a very traditional social science methods, experimental designs in the lab, or etc. Today, I want to really look into AI in human teams and groups. And I want to talk about social intelligence. Maybe not necessarily a scientifically established term, but if you read some recent articles talk about, the AI needs to have this ability to be accurate, because if it's not in its prediction, it needs to be, be able to make predictions that are useful for humans. At the same time, they should also have some social intelligence, should have the ability to show expressions, emotions. We talked about this yesterday. Maybe be aware of human biases, etc. So that's kind of another dimension of intelligence that's discussed right now in research and practice. So, well, one might think that goes together, but I believe that they're right now 2 separate discussions going on, and they have an impact on how humans and AI team up, and also the ability to actually form a symbiotic relationship between AI and humans. So the first study is about that, and the first study is about empathy in conversational AI in one-to-one human teams. So it's actually a study that I started here with Daniel. Daniel here is at Northwestern, and he also is working with Innovation Labs. Innovation Lab is also involved from computer science, where there's a huge discussion about AI and law and CS, and he's been very active on that. And the motivation was there, well, we have an increasing uptake of bots in areas where it was very important in the past to have an expert, delivering the service. Like we talk about healthcare, doctor, or we talk about law and legal experts that give advice. But nowadays we have these chatbots being developed, and it's actually this research was motivated practically because we got exposed to Rent-A-Vention, which is an organization, a law organization here in Chicago that has built that bot, and Rennie we call it. And there's some concerns, in particular among the professions of lawyers, to say such bots can never substitute a lawyer, because a bot can never substitute a lawyer giving advice, because we built that interpersonal relationship, and it's impossible that a bot can do that. It's not necessarily about the knowledge, because they agree, yes, there might be a way to to really build an expert system to do that. So, well, there are tools out there that now, they can use, and they've built their bots, and then they try to use now advancement in generative AI. We talked about this a little. There's transformers, pre-trained transformers that are generative. Chat GPT, GPT-3 is out there. Use advanced natural language processing models. BERT is standard, everybody knows it. And they've tried to use that to really build better conversation and ensure that the bot is maybe also more aware of what the human feels, and not just necessarily what advice it should give. Maybe sometimes I even say he should give. Well, standard is that many bots still rely on rule-based systems. Rule-based systems that are built by experts, in particular in this case a law. There's the law, and so the access to training data would be there in terms of legal documents, but actually how legal cases are solved is still kind of really hidden knowledge. So training, a bot on a large data set is hard. So there's going to be these rules, and then use generative AI for natural language generation and so on top of that then rely on neural networks, active learning, transformer learning, etc. But we were planning to do that and have a lot of techies, in my lab. We said, let's try to see how we can use this generative AI and to work with Rent-A-Vention to make it better. But then throughout the conversation, we thought, there's fundamentally something related to be studied first in a more traditional way before we do something like this. And that is focusing on empathy, in particular effective empathy, in the way the bot gives advice, in the way the bot, talks to the human. And yes, there's a lot of discussion in the social science waves about empathy, what it is, effective and cognitive. And we know there's an effective and a cognitive component. And I'm going to focus only on the effective part, which is basically, kind of an automated response. And there's, in linguistic, actually theory that has particular focus, not necessarily underlying reasons why people are empathic or not, even, so there's individual differences, can be learned, is situation specific and so on, but actually how it is expressed in the conversation style, how we speak. And, if I take the literature and how it on the one hand, there's a discussion. We know that it matters, and there's a bit of a hiccup if this is moderated or interacting with emotion, particularly anger. And anger, the reason why we focus on anger, because in a legal setting, actually anger is something that's very relevant, comes out of literature. And then there's this increasing uptake now, discussion also in the AI literature, that empathy matters, and they try to build some empathy, and they use some, smart algorithm to do so. And apparently it has a positive effect because they're training on the different emotional step. But what's really unclear is how does the actual display of empathy based on lexical and syntactic elements affect the relationship between a human and AI. And when I say syntactic and syntactic elements or rhetoric elements, I specifically focus on very simple changes in the way you talk, like third person or first person, etc. So we kind of developed a kind of a theoretical model. We argue that effective empathy, the way it's displayed through language, has a positive effect on the relationship, and it may also be moderated by anger, but positively, because if you think about attention control, it basically allows you to, if you have some empathy in the language, it allows you to better cope with your anger at a particular moment. Well, so based on that kind of theory, you can actually think about rules on how you talk. And here's just the comparison between non-empathy and empathy. And the one in terms of the person, for example, you say this problem can be solved rather than we can solve this problem. You say the deficit rather than your deficit. Small little changes like this. Or you use past tense in a no empathy, or you use present tense. You use exclamations. You just say continue, or let's see this invitational rhetoric argument. Acknowledgement, small little things that are discussed in this original theory of linguistics. Actually, there's some Japanese scholars that have done a lot of work on that, Italian scholars on that. So based on that, actually, work with intervention and change the bot and the cognitive abilities. We basically hold that constant. We don't change that. We use intervention from that company and only change the way empathy is displayed in language and change the rule system. Here's an example. Based on the information provided, it took the landlord more than 30 days since the tenant moved out. The tenant was supposed to have, and then based on what we know, it took your landlord, you should have received. Simple changes like this. Well, we were kind of not sure whether this is going to have an impact. But then, we're motivated by that theory and reading these articles. We go, let's try. And so we then sampled people into 3 different treatment groups. We built our own Firebase app where we embedded those bot models. Built also another control, which is an FAQ site, which is actually we took in an existing site that's used there, and then basically used the Northwestern Sonic pool. People that are older than 18 years, fluent in English, etc., and sampled people in there. Yeah, they went through. Then once they were in that treatment group, we also induced anger, follow also existing, they got a scenario where they were really then, we made them angry about legal services. You might question whether this is enough. We did a lot of p-testing on that and then measured cognitive effort, helpfulness, and trustworthiness with surveys, but also we looked at some behavioral scales and comprehension, interrupting. It's kind of workflow. I think I don't have time to go through all that. How much more do I have?
50.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of the scenario. I think I'm just going to click through. So here are some preliminary results that we find after running some factor, ANOVAs, but also regression DLM models. Empathy apparently reduces the cognitive effort and increases the helpfulness. There is some, main effects from the ANOVAs that you find even on the interaction and the action, if you look at the main effect, if you look at the simple effects, what is really interesting and pretty strong is with the trustworthiness, you see if there's no anger, empathy really increases trustworthiness. But if there's anger, it's actually low. So it doesn't really have that much of an effect. So yeah, we can support the hypothesis that empathy expressed in language matters. And also when we put in a bunch of controls in the regression, it doesn't change anything. The effects are still there. So there seems to be an effect that if you have empathy in a language, that actually increases human-AI teaming relationship. But anger actually might really, throw that away. Well, there's then contributions of research on empathy, and also in contribution literature, but also has practical implications. So you have to think about how you design your bot. And when we talked a lot about the engineers that built that bot, they were just drawing things they were thinking of. How do I design it? Yeah, I just do it the way I think I should write, But it actually matters how you write. And even if the rule is great, and if, the legal suggestion made is right, it might throw off the person. So yeah, how are we taking that further? Yeah, we definitely want to now also work on generative AIs, but I think we're going to actually consider that as we are training some neural networks on that, and consider that when we try to predict an emotional state, and also when we try to predict then an empathy response, because it apparently matters how you structure from a syntax point or from a rhetoric point of view your response before you think a higher level kind of empathy constructs or emotions. Well, that's the second study. I don't even know whether I'm going to get through this because I didn't practice, but let's see. The other topic is about nudging humans into collective action through AI-enabled social norms, a deep reinforcement learning model. That's something coming out of research together with Chatayu. It's one of my former students. He's now at Facebook. By the way, if you use Facebook and you're single and you're doing all that partner matching, he's actually working on the matchmaking algorithm behind it. Maybe I'm not allowed to say that. But yes, he might get angry at me. So, but we've been working as we still work together on collective action. You might know all about that, the tragedy of the commons, because everybody tries to think individually, you optimize your individual reward, even though you would be better off if you're actually, contributing to the commons, to the collective good. And overfishing is used as a typical example. I mean, we know about energy conservation, climate change is one of these examples out there that we are aware of nowadays where collective action is really having an impact. Well, in research, we use collective action games to study that, and there's been a tremendous amount of work on that. And they consider that we actually fall into 4 categories. We have people that are cooperative. We have people that are free riders that never cooperate. And then there are conditionally cooperative people that are sensitive to their own, reward, so to speak, what they were doing in that particular time, and also the behavior of the group. So if the group is going up, they might also do more. If the group is going down, they do less. And here is just an example of a game. If you have at the end of the game, that's 25 rounds, then you have a certain number of points. In a collective action game, you would then equally split that based on a factor that is increased. So it's just modeled off of some of those games, our research. But the overall problem always is in that research is like, how do I address these conditionally cooperative people that stop contributing because we do in the beginning often have that curve going down. Now, what do I do? How do I design things? Should I pay them more? Should I punish them? And there's this concept of social norms and descriptive norms in particular that has shown to be actually effective. And the social norm, not just something that's discussed there in behavioral economics. You change the architecture around the human by showing them what others are doing. And even though there's research that has built reinforcement learning models to model the conditionally cooperative behaviors, there isn't much on the role of AI in that. So you're throwing an AI agent. Well, and that's where our research makes a contribution. Let me click through. Those are just examples. There's increasing work right now that shows, if you basically have an AI agent that's a real agent in these collective action games, people might actually adhere to social norms more. There's a study done in hospitals where they put up a robot and it showed you how much the robot basically saved in his energy, the way he acted, and then just showed that, and apparently that had an effect. Yeah, and that kind of triggered our thinking. And then we built an RL agent, a traditional one it's a human-like agent. I don't think I have time to go through that in detail, the logic. That's kind of is rule-based still. It uses ideas that people from the Carnegie Mellon School know about aspiration and adapt that. Here's the formula for that. What we then did, we built a deep RL agent, which is basically more intelligence, and that's what I consider, as an intelligent AI that we put into this collective action game that tries to optimize the group score, basically creating social norm and social norm nudges through his own behavior. Deep RL basically all depends on for elements. You have a state space, an action space, a transition space. You have a reward. You don't have a rule, but you're trying just to learn the best policy. At least that's an algorithm we chose. We used one of the recent algorithms, policy optimization, without going into detail. It's different from Q-learning in case you know that Q-learning is model-free. You don't necessarily have a policy of characteristic changes. We use that. And it's more stable. We adapted that. But we trained it on two things: to optimize the outcome in terms of the sum contributions made, or the number of conditionally cooperative people, those that basically contribute more. And so that's kind of the theoretical model and behind. So we used 4 to 3 are real people, and in the end that follow a reinforcement learning model, and it has been empirically validated, and we validate ourselves. And we put a bot in here that has either the goal to increase the number of cooperators or increase the total sum. 2 different reward functions. So kind of control, and then we had 2 treatment conditions. Validated the results, so empirically validated our baseline, our human agents, and they really follow empirical patterns. And then this is the treatment. It's kind of the baseline model with only the human agent that are based on RNL. And then we have the 2 different AI agents that we trained, the proportional and the sum agent, as we call them. And I don't know whether you see that, but you see a subtle shift of the distribution. You have more people on the higher end. And this is now for the median. If you then look at that, you see that, the AI agent follows a very different behavior in terms of contribution over time. Here, that line looks pretty staged. That's kind of the mean contribution of the humans. And you might think that might not have big of a change, but if you compare that to the baseline, that's actually a 20% increase or 26% increase, depending on the AI agent that we trained, in terms of contribution at the end. So, and if you look at the median even more, that shows us that AI can actually have an impact, apparently, on shaping human behaviors indirectly. Well, contributes to existing work. I don't have time to go through this, because we show that AI can actually play a role in shaping, social norms indirectly, kind of an invisible hand on top, and then create social norms. Well, there are limitations. We didn't put this in a real condition yet. We basically built simulations here based on empirical data validated, but that's actually what we're going to do next. And we did not kind of give that a physical embodied structure. We don't work on robots here. But the next thing is we are going to go back and play these games which we've done before in the lab and online. And we also work with housing communities where we have energy conservation and using that bot. And that's the next step. And then hopefully also thinking about network structures, because some of the early work has also looked into different information flows among agents. Well, that's it. I think I have 5 minutes.
You still have 5 minutes to present if you'd like.
Yeah? I can either now go to the discussion or present a little bit on the project with UAVs that we're doing. I should continue?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so just concluding that those are the next steps that we're moving on with that. And I hopefully can share some results as this is moving forward. One last thing that my group is doing is it's related to what Paul has been talking about yesterday. How can I use physiological data and neurotech, as I call it, or brain-human interfaces that collect data about the human in real time to shape human autonomy, interaction and relationship. And that's together with colleagues in aeronautical engineering, together with people also in cognitive science and a computer science background, and also neuroscientists. Some of these ideas that you see here also come from discussion with Moran. It's early stage, but some of that is actually building upon work that's already done in cognitive engineering at our work. So kind of the vision here is to say that in the future, if you think about UAVs flying around there, you basically have the ability, through the smartness of the things we wear, interact with the UAV in a way that you can create shared intelligence models that consider the state of the human in real time, and also make use of the increased intelligence of the UAV. And how would that work if you don't see that UAV because it's flying around there? Well, we use also, digital interfaces. And today, the way what we call them operators, remote operators, interact with the UAV is mostly still kind of, text-based, touch-based. We have a classical way of interacting. But there's new ways of now creating interactions. It's basically through haptic, vibrations, etc. And with that, you can make use of our maybe more holistic sense-making when it comes to a very critical situation, when there is a potential need for bringing in a human in the loop. What do we need there? We need to also incorporate, the existing work of control theory, which is very important, and connect that with ideas of AI. What's important for that? So we've been building, and it's kind of recent, a new operations center, as we call that, where you have people that operate these drones, where all these sensors, these new wearables, and with that, you can then collect data. And we started to collect data and build models on that. And then the goal would also be to find new ways to design sensory additions where you can basically be informed about where the UAV is by feeling it on your back, because you have a map produced on the back, and you can sense the distance of the UAV and how far it is away. Well, there's already been some work done at our group, and in particular by INSEAD, which is a colleague of mine, by using haptic or very tactical responses, and trained then an inverse reinforcement learning model, and with that having shared control, where you have control structures where the actual UAV knows whether the human is right now an expert or not, based on its actual behavior and its satisfying behavior in the past. And that can then be used to decide whether and how it should hand over control. And now the goal would be to consider also more higher level decision making related to that. I'll end here. I think, just to conclude, I think we need to think about social intelligence as we think about cognitive intelligence and consider them in the loop. We also need to bring in the human in the loop constantly as we're thinking about optimizing human AI relationships. Thank you.
Round of applause for you. Dean, I think you just showed us our future. Questions?
I'm not allowed to answer questions. Yeah.
I remember an old joke. What does it take to succeed in television? The answer is integrity. If you can fake it, you've got it made. And I'm worried about an evil person who's sitting in this room and coming up with lots of ideas how to build more effective evil bots. Have you considered that this whole thing, how to be more effective, can be used also for evil purposes?
There's always a bad side. Yeah, misinformation is out there. And I agree with that. That's a concern. That is a concern. Yes, I agree. Have I thought about this? There is a lot of discussion, AI and fairness, etc. Right? So how do we address that? That has to be considered, I would argue, as we're building these intelligence models as well. And that's where we, I guess, as scholars ourselves, have to have a responsibility in making sure it's a norm, we should adhere to. But also there is, regulatory issues going on. The European Commission has just, issued, policies for AI design. There's a lot going on. Even NAST and NIST, etc., as a standardization organization, also releases, standards for that. So it's a big discussion. My colleagues are involved in some of these discussions. I'm not directly, but yes, it's an important topic, I agree.
I mean, I'm worried about the economic incentive. What is the economic incentive to have more effective rental help chatbots or more effective spammers? What's a bigger market?
I hear, coming back to the law example and having a bot for law services. Actually, I think there's a positive argument because many people cannot afford to pay a lawyer. But if you have a bot that gives you actually access to law and information you actually benefit from it. And that's, I think, where it's more about making changes in the legal profession, how they think about it, and make sure that they are able to hire people with skills to do that so that more people have access.
No, I'm not doubting that there is a lot of room to use good. I'm looking at the market, what the economic incentives are.
Yeah, I'm asking the economists.
And I just see the economic incentives are much more on the negative side than on the positive side, I'm afraid.
I guess it's a question to bring back to others, right? I believe in the good of human people, right? And that's why I think there are the positive elements, and you should also try to find algorithms that are good, right? And whether you can prevent others to build bad ones, that's an important question that relates to regulation, policy making, etc.
Thank you.
And if you are an economist, please share your answer with us. I'd love to hear that.
This is really exciting work, and I'm curious about how you measure empathy expression and the changes between the original text and then the kind of empathy-enhanced text in the medical and legal examples. Like, how do you know that it's more empathetic, or what were the ways that you measured it was so?
Oh, right now it was a treatment we designed, so to speak, right? So we basically, went through the whole text as a team. We didn't train anything. We had a rule-based system. We basically, created that from theory and went through. And then I showed basically the rules that we applied and made those changes, right? And then ran an experiments. How would I now do that as I'm moving forward? I would basically, have to train, algorithm based on labels, human labels. You need to have some labels first at this point and consider that. I mean, there's also out there, I could give you libraries out there, that you might know all of those. But if you look at those libraries that don't consider the syntactic and so on elements, they basically have higher level labels. So I didn't find that very useful when we looked at that and thinking of training actually model, because it's just, these very high level construct that they use to label that. You might know the existing algorithms and the data set. I could share that as well afterwards, because that's something we were thinking of using first. And then I realized that doesn't really help me to get to that issue of simple changes. And it was really when we just looked at what they put in there, in their bot. And then I was like, why did you write it like, in a very colloquial sense? I would be thrown off Yeah, so this is how you would do it.
No, I like that, and I think there's like interesting research problems in how we disentangle empathy versus respect, kindfulness, non-dominance, all those kind of things, and then there's the subjectivities that get involved here too.
So there's also this huge research on anthropomorphism. It's like, oh, you make that more similar, right? Just in terms of language. Again, very high level, but it doesn't go to the underlying reasons why. So basically, that's why I ran a controlled experiment to explain why. And it comes actually down to simple things: first person, third person, to invitational rhetoric or not. Let's see, or say, the landlord, or you, right? And so these simple things apparently matter. And I think we need more computational linguistics to come to the discourse and help us to improve these kind of models that are now labeled at a very high level through MTurk or some other things. And these data sets are then used by a practitioner out there, and they're used in the packages.
I have a question about, I noticed that in some of your examples that you were using the word rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I know colleagues who use the word rhetoric a lot. Aristotle defined it as a counterpart of dialectic, but I've never heard computer scientists embed it into their work. I'm just curious what it is you're using as rhetoric in the examples that you have here.
Give you just an example of a rule can throw back. Right, can I see that? Oops. Here, so stimulating dialogue that you, instead of saying continue, you would say let us see, which is considered Russian. Sorry, my accent. Just the way you express, for example, is an invitational, statement you make.
I see.
Yeah. So this here are the rules. Basically, come from some of these theories on syntax and rhetoric and how you design empathy in an effective way.
I see. Okay. Great.
Does that answer?
That's not the way I'm used to hearing it defined, but it's not. It's a legitimate way to.
So that's basically based on the linguistic theories that are not computational.
I'm sorry?
Based on linguistic theories that are not computational, come up from computational scholars, but really just linguistic arguments.
Okay.
Any more?
Oh my God.
I'm not an economist, but I'm a lawyer, so I'm also very interested in the legal study. I'm always wondering when you say social intelligence, how do you distinguish that from emotional intelligence?
It is not, it's just subsuming, so to speak, it is related to that, but emotions are not everything when it comes to social aspects, yes.
Turn around, we got two before you, and then we'll get to you.
Thank you, Sabine. That was really interesting. And it's related to a DARPA program that Anita and I are working on artificial social intelligence. So I'll share that with you. But my question is, how did you induce anger in your participants in a way that was acceptable to the IRB?
That's a good question.
So I can show you the scenario again. We basically, made the people very angry about their landlord, right? And because of the money he keeps, and in general, how much, because it's actually true that many people actually lose money because they're not getting it back because they behave differently, but they don't go to your lawyer because they don't know that they can actually get something. So we basically created that and that scenario. Yeah, we did not use there's other ways of doing that, sound, etc. It's really text based. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, and to get, I think what Peter was pointing to, you know, in a transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary setting that we are right now, for communication scholars, rhetoric is something very specific. So I think this kind of comes back to kind of the issue that came up earlier with nesting. And so I think when we hear rhetoric, we associate that, like, things that fall under rhetoric for us are things like the debate team, and like, or looking very much at, you know, how arguments are constructed. And so that has a very specific meaning, right? And so this is all about us learning about different ways these terms are employed. And of course, you know, I see that you have a lot of background in the literature. One thing I would encourage you to, and this may have been done already because obviously not all your literature is up there, but there is a lot on communication and empathy. And some of this shows up in the psychological literature, right? So communication, right, okay. And psychology, you know, kind of, but
I'm aware of this, like with the nested, it's the same thing. You know? And it's the same problem there, right?
Right.
So we basically really literally went into the work on an expression of empathy in text and language, and they're using their concepts.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think in the text as well, in the language, but I think also since we're getting into the chatbot realm, we're talking about what we consider conversational
practice, yeah?
Yes. Okay. And so that's where I was just kind of, because I was looking at some of the references, and obviously you can't have them all up there. And so that would be a generative area, but it sounds like you've got it covered. So thank you. Thank you for.
There are a lot more,
of course.
Right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take one last question over here, and while you're answering that last question, Sabine, I'm going to encourage you to come to the front while you come up and set up. So, do you mind answering?
Yeah, so right over here. So I'm curious with the applications for law and mental health. Those like I'm starting to see like a theme for other presentations yesterday, but I'm thinking of our music education last night where the musicians mentioned that, you know, they don't like when a conductor, you know, is very mean or harsh and that kind of thing. So I'm curious, what could you see being responses to non-empathetic AI in those like trust-based kind of professions? So it's not quite trust repair, but if I'm dealing with like a law chatbot that is unsympathetic or unempathetic, is that a space where we could see people deciding to opt for the more expensive human, or are you thinking that there could be other kinds of potential opportunities for competitors to differentiate in the market based on how emotionally like comforting they could be? I'm just curious how you could view that.
You need to have a really good bot that's, you know, not saying stupid things in terms of, for example, the legal advice, right? But you can definitely differentiate in the way it considers a human emotion and also how it expresses language, emotions, or in particular in this case, affective empathy. I'm convinced that it matters a lot, and that we need a lot more work to do that. And this is basically just the start, like looking into a small little thing of affective empathy. There's more things, that's what we want to also do, right? But I think you need to consider both. You know, everybody talks about they're not predictive, they're making the wrong predictions, our algorithms are not good enough. At the same time, we also need to find better ways to design the software, you know, emotional implicit to self-propagated intelligence of our agents as well, that also have an impact.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Let us and Balazs, come up. I believe Balazs wins the award for coming from the farthest University of farthest distance. 12-hour plane ride is what I looked up from Kiev, almost from Kiev, Ukraine. So, I apologize. From Vienna. So, this is our final talk in this session, and looking forward to what you have to say.
Wake up call. All right, so I'm really excited to be here with you. I think this is also really fresh. This is not even been written up. Working with two fantastic co-authors, Linda Lee at Oxford and Orsia Vashahi at CU Budapest. So what I would like to talk about today is the impact of bots on human-to-human ties. It's as simple as that little sentence. Maybe you put a question mark in the end. Do bots reshape human collaborations in the wild? So we do live with bots increasingly. We do have a lot of contexts in which we have bots amongst us. And this little this little quote, I think is very relevant. The future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed yet. We have contexts where people have been living with bots as almost equal footing collaborators for decades now. If you think of Wikipedia, the first bots were licensed in 2008, and there had been thousands of bots there. We will look at that case. So we do have real-life situations with lots of bots integrated with humans. So that's what we will be looking at. There are many studies with experiments, exciting experiments, where people look at how bots impact the human collaborations. Maybe they energize collaborations, maybe they hinder them. The findings vary. But those experiments artificially inject bots into human collaborations. We are looking at contexts where bots themselves are coming endogenously out of the field. People make them for a purpose, and they're there to live with those people in those fields. So this is really exciting for me. So as I was supervising students at Oxford when I was running the social data science DPhil program, what was striking me is that many students and many scholars who do research on Twitter, say, would start their papers, say, in the data and method section. We have collected 5 million tweets, and then half a sentence say we used Botsometer or deep learning or whatever in the forest to identify bots, and we have deleted them, period. And then we look at the remaining data set. Wow, so you eliminate half of your nodes and about 60% of your ties, and you think you are looking at a meaningful network structure. I don't think so. This is a comparison. These are both Twitter networks. So if you look at this first one, this is the Egyptian revolution, the Arab Spring 2010. There were no bots at that time on Twitter. Social bots on Twitter were discussed at ACM conferences as a possibility. 2017, 2016, Twitter discussion of vaccinations, full of bots. The red dots are the bots. This is an explosive phenomenon. Now we need to understand, imagine this network if you take out the red nodes. Is it meaningful? Is it anything, representing a real network? If you look at an organization at a telecom company and you say, oh, I took out everybody with technical expertise, and this is the remaining network, which I think of as meaningful, I don't think so. So where are these settings that we should be looking at? Bots are thriving on platforms, and platforms are the places, or the contexts, where bots are co-evolving both with the human collaborators and with the platforms themselves. The biggest drop ever in the history of stocks, Meta, was because of the first report that the number of users might be declining. We need attention, we need users, we need action. So platforms are really places where automation can be thriving. Why do we think that it's interesting to look at the human-to-human sociability in the face of bots? I think this is really important because we might be looking at a case where for the first time in probably 60 million years, we see actors who do not share the fundamental mechanisms and instincts of sociability with us. How many of you know Mark Granovetter's neighborhood overlap hypothesis? Yes. It's the most cited paper in the social sciences, and it's the core hypothesis, which says the stronger the tie you have with somebody, the more your network neighborhood overlaps. It's a fundamental mechanism of human networking. And as I was teaching my social networks class, we were looking at various animal species and the animal social networks. This is a booming subfield in social network analysis, looking at animal species. And guess what? If you test this hypothesis, it works out on animal social networks up to about 60 million years on the evolutionary tree. But bots do not have this instinct. So what's the future of our networks when we are mixed with agents that do not have this fundamental mechanism? So I think it's reasonable to expect some kind of a social disruption. So how does a social system with artificial agents look like? I really like this summary article in Nature 2019 that looks at machine behavior. Machine behavior is something that we should think of in the context of not only the algorithm that's there in the machine, but how machines relate to one another, how machines relate to humans, and then also how humans relate to humans in this ecosystem with machines. What I will be looking at today is exclusively this dyad, the human-to-human dyad in this ecosystem where we have machines mixed in. This is a translation of that idea into various platforms by Cvetko and co-authors 2017, and you just see the astonishing variability of these triads when you have a machine, two humans, what kind of interactions, relationships, processes can go on, lots of different relations, dynamics, closure or not closure. So there's a wide range of variability. Once you get into this sense of social networks that are mixed with artificial and human agents, there's a lot of possibilities how that could play out. So this is the core idea here that we take as the ABC triad. So I'm looking at the ABC triad, the author, bot, and collaborator. Why I think this is really interesting, in a collaborative platform, this is an author, like Wikipedia, an author, a bot that the author controls or writes, and then the collaborator who works with this author, and possibly with the bot. On a Twitter setting, we're looking at two settings. You have activists who are meeting bots, and they have communication partners. And the question again, what happens to this communication tie between the activist and its human communication partners? So the AC dyad in the ABC triad is the focus of the analysis. The methodological setup, this is decidedly not a project yet to find answers to a why question. I don't pretend that I have the ambition or any answers to a why question, why do bots disrupt? It's just a whether question, whether bots disrupt human sociability. So we have a causal setup, a difference in difference setup, where we follow dyads. This is the units of analysis of dyads between people, and then the red line shows people who have been impacted by bots at the moment. And this is interesting in our data that we have the moment the bot is launched, or a moment when the bot enters a communicative setting, and we wonder what happens to the strength, existence, emotional content of that human dyad. And we have a matched sample, people who are matched to our bot-exposed individuals in many ways, but they have never met a bot, or they have never launched a bot. Okay, so this difference is what we are interested in, or difference in difference. It's how we go from the before to the after. The difference for the match sample, we don't expect that to be anything, maybe 0, and then the difference is we expect a negative difference for the exposed. So the difference in differences is what we are looking at. All right, so I'll be showing two case studies that are radically different, and I think different in really interesting ways. The first case is social bots on Twitter. So probably you all know social bots on Twitter is a major problem. These bots are mostly malicious. These bots are hidden, trying to pass as human accounts. Otherwise, they are deleted because they're against the rules of the platform. They evolve under evolutionary pressure of deletion. So we have now probably the fourth wave of social bots, fourth generation. And they are in the context of activism, people trying to discuss the public good. And we suspect, we know previously, there's fundamental disruption to discussions of the public good online. The second setting, Wikipedia, is very different. We have bots that are all beneficial. If they're not beneficial, their license is revoked. They are licensed. They are manifestly labeled as bots. They have to be attached to an owner, and they have to be responsible for the behavior of their bots. And they are there for constructive reasons. They write pages, they write page categories, so they do sophisticated work. We look at both contexts to have an increased validity here. So Twitter first. We follow Extinction Rebellion, flare-ups, discussions on Twitter. This is 2019, two periods of intense discussions, going by some hashtags and getting 200,000 tweets and about 120,000 users, many bots among them. Now, of course, before if I go to numbers and just ask you, what do you think? What's the proportion of communications in these fields that come from bots? 10%, 20%, 30%?
40.
What is that?
75.
75, Jesus. No, we are getting there. Maybe today is that. This is 2019.
50.
Yeah, so more than 50%. This is a figure that I really like. I took it from a PNAS 2018. Looking at 2017 public discussions data, the Yellow Vest movements, the Black Lives Matter, something similar movements to the Extinction Rebellion. And they have showed you have 30%, about 31% bot users, 69% human users, and about a little more than 50% of the total communication activity coming from bots. In our data, we are now approaching almost half of the users are bots, and more than 60% of the communications come from these artificial users. I also have to pause here and just reflect on what is a bot. We are agnostic about what these bots do. But there are also some helpful bots on Twitter. Most are malicious. But what I need to reflect on is the detection of them. So unlike gender detection, where you have a rather clear underlying but hidden category, and maybe you try to recognize gender from names, recognizing bots is not about recognizing a hidden but clear distinction of actors, but rather algorithmicity of users is a continuous dimension. There are humans who behave in algorithmic ways. We have seen in the Iranian Revolution grandmothers getting onto Twitter, and they think Twitter is about tweeting a hashtag every 2 minutes, and they behave like bots, but they're just grandmas. And this is a continuum going from a bit algorithmic to absolutely fully robotic, like spam bots tweeting the same thing 10,000 times a minute. They will be easily deleted now on Twitter. But this is a continuum, even the underlying category. So it's not clearly people versus bots. That's two teams, the reds and the blues. I'm just making that clear, but it's not clear in the data. It's clear in Wikipedia, but not clear on Twitter for sure. So there's lots of bots that communicate a lot. And this is what's interesting. I expected to see the dynamic of this to be humans start discussions that flares up and they react to one another, and maybe the bots will be just a flat line, they always just push the same thing. But it's not true. Actually, the opposite is true. Bots are reacting much faster to events. And if you look at the Granger causality of the bot amount and the human amount, there's a significant Granger causality from bot amount to human, but not from human to bot. So bots are driving the dynamics of discussions. Overall, if you look at amounts, the number of times you retweet a bot and the number of times you retweet a human, there's a negative correlation. So it's not, I expected this to be positive. So you're just more active and you retweet whomever, maybe bots, maybe humans, but to the same proportion. But it's a negative. So there are people who get caught up in these bots communities.
Falaj, just a very quick question.
Go ahead.
But who has more followers, bots or humans?
That's a good question.
Because
I
then
think
there's
it's
a
not
multiplier
clear.
effect, right?
Yeah.
So humans may retweet less, but if they have more followers, the impact may actually be
But that might be true. What we are really interested in is the individual's kind of algorithm.
Fair enough, I
behavior.
was just curious.
What do you do? If you retweet a bot, you also retweet humans. You take something from a bot and you retweet it. Take from a human, retweet it. It seems to be you either pay attention to the bots or to the humans. It's not the same thing. I'm going in a positive direction, which was puzzling to me. I still don't know what's really behind this. But here's the different diffs. So we are looking at sentiment first. At first, we're looking at absolute sentiment. So not negative and positive, but whether you are at zero. We expect discussions about the public good to be rational, optimally. So we discuss the factual things and not just, I hate it, I love it, kind of reactions. So what's happening here is if you look at absolute sentiment, is that the gray ones are matched, and we normalize everybody to the before. So in the Twitter setup, we have 30 days before someone meets a bot for the first time, and then 30 days after they met the bot. And the matched sample have never met the bot, in the sense that the retweeted replied to a bot message, which is hard to find. People who never met a bot. And people who met the bot often met the bot multiple times. We saw somebody retweeted bot 30 times. So we just look at the first instance. So it was not easy to find the data in this structure or to refine it. But what we have here is the gray ones never met the bot, and then the red ones, at this moment, they met the bot, and this is the 30 days before, 30 days after averages. And you see an increase in the absolute sentiment. So they move away from rational, natural discussion to something sentiment-driven.
To what?
Go ahead.
To what?
To sentiment-driven. So they either say, I hate this, or I love this. Instead of saying, this climate change seems to be real, this is a report.
No, I understand. I just didn't hear the word.
Yeah, sorry. What we see here is that, there's this absolute sentiment. If you look at the raw sentiment, so it can go to negative or positive, you don't see a clear, significant difference. The bot exposes maybe a bit below. But if we refine this data, so we go to triple interactions in the diff and diff. So we add whether the bot is below median likes. So it's not a nice bot that people like. There are some nice bots on Twitter, giving you news regularly, you can sign up for that. But there are malicious bots that are never liked. Or the interaction sentiment itself was negative. So what the bot was saying was something negative in sentiment. We then see the raw sentiment being below. So basically, these are algorithmic jerks on Twitter that agitate you. Now mind this is not the response to the bot. This is what then the way the human talks to other humans after this event. So this is spillover to human networks. The change in the number of tweets, overall there's not a significant difference. But once you look at kind of nasty bots, there is a silencing effect, and that is really worrying. So this is what really worries me. Is in a public sphere, you can deploy nasty bots, and you can silence people. This effect is not huge. This is you go down a daily 0.2 tweets, but this is a bit like death by 1,000 cuts. How many times people read bots in the public sphere? Must be tens of thousands of times a day. So it's really something that shuts up and silences public spheres online. And then this is something really new. We haven't really analyzed it properly, but we move to communities and networks, and you see just a tremendous infection, and it's kind of different by communities of bots, the red nodes. In some communities, sometimes you might reach a point where it's just bots talking to each other, and then there are no humans, it seems. But the question is, well, what happens with closure, solidarity, cohesion in these networks then, with the humans? This is still ahead of us. So this was Twitter. Wikipedia is more interesting now because the bots there supposedly are all positive, useful, beneficial, helping. They're licensed, so if they do something bad, they will be shut down. And there's lots of cases when they are shut down. There's discussion forums to air grievances against Wikipedia bots. your bot undid something that I worked on for so long. I'm really angry. Undo it and shut it down, change it. And there's, Wikimedia Foundation comes in and they maybe intervene. So what's the size of the phenomenon on Wikipedia? This is, I think, 2019. The whole pie is the total number of edits on Wikipedia, many hundreds of millions. And bots are there at 12% edits at that time, on par with the 1,000 most prolific human editors. So this is not an insignificant chunk. 77 million edits by bots in that year. So Wikipedia is interesting because this is an old case. So if you look at the frequency of bot licenses, it goes up in 2006, 2008, and then it goes down. But once licensed, these bots operate. And then you can change the algorithm, and it's okay until there's a grievance and you have to shut it down. What they do is not just broken link checking, but often sophisticated work to establish pages and page categories. So really making content. We measure the strength of the human-to-human collaborative tie by the co-editing frequencies of pages. So it's a bipartite dynamic network underlying the data structure. We turn it into a weighted unipartite co-edit frequency in temporal windows. And we track these human-to-human dyads. So each of our data points is a pair of humans. This is the collaboration strength. And we have here 12 months of history before and 12 months of history after a bot was launched. So one of the collaborators in the dyad, a human, has decided to launch a bot on day 0. And then we track the collaboration weight. Maybe it ends, never comes back, or maybe it goes down, comes back up. There's a large variety of histories. Again, hundreds of thousands of these. So what we see overall is that to the matched users who have never launched the bot owners have a decreasing tie rate even before they launch a bot, and then they stay down, significantly lower, so 20% lower in their collaboration rate than humans. Go ahead.
When it comes to collaboration in the Wikipedia, are you looking at the mentions of in the edit page, or are you looking at the discussion page of the Wikipedia? Or
we separate 4 types of pages: the main pages, the talk pages, the wiki pages, and some other pages. Mm-hmm. So now I'm focusing on the main pages, so the public-facing Wikipedia pages.
And the dyadic, so it's like,
yes.
For example, one page has 100 people contributed
yes.
over 10 years.
Over
How
10
the
years.
collaborations actually?
The collaboration is measured for a given individual, looking at all the pages the individual edited. We look at the daily resolution, and we see on that day, have you been editing a page together with somebody? Mm-hmm. And then we aggregate these co-edit events. And your top collaborators are those that edit with you in the same day, several pages. That gives the weight of the collaboration, and we aggregate to months just to be easier to visualize. But it's co-presence, co-editing pages on the same day, not just the same month. So we try to get to like a meaningful co-attention to the same page and making edits to the same page, and not just one page, but many pages, and that gives the weight to a dyadic collaboration.
I was just thinking of this mentioning in the edits. I can mention your work, and then.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, instead of like collaborate. I mean, collaboration is a loose term here.
It's a loose term. Yeah,
that's right. So
we try to restrict it by focusing on the top 50%, top 25% highest weight collaborators. What we see there consistently, this is again definitive point estimates, is that the bot owners are always under the matched users in terms of the weight after the bot launch. Now, you can think of this as any kind of shift in attention could lead to a drop in your collaboration weights. You can replace launching a bot by picking up stamp collecting. If you do something else, you shift your attention away from Wikipedia. So really that's why bot owners do not collaborate as much, because they just become geeks who program these bots and become busy with that. So we look at the bot activity to see if that has anything to do with the collaboration weight in the human-to-human diet. And it does. So This is the order of magnitudes of bot edits in 3 months after bot launch. And then from the 4th month almost to the 12th month, we look at the collaboration rates of your human collaborators. And there's this downward slope for the bot owners, so there's no such thing in the matched dyads. And also for lost collaboration, there's a probability you never see your collaborator again after 3 months of bot activity. In the next 9 months, in the 12-month window, we see a significant uptick in the probability of losing your collaborator as a function of the number of edits your bot is doing. And there's no such thing with the matched users. So there seems to be something to the bot. So you launch a collaborator that's artificial. It starts doing lots of things. And the more things that the bot is doing, the more that you lose your human collaborator. Okay, so conclusions. What was really interesting for me is there seems to be a loss in many ways. There's convergent results in these two cases. Well, first of all, is this a problem? Aren't we launching bots to replace human collaborations? Should we be worried in any way? Isn't this what we wanted? And we thought of, yeah, let's have bots. They would do what we have. I don't really know the final answer for that. Probably it's not very helpful in the public sphere. And I'm not sure what Wikipedia editors are thinking with the loss of the human collaborators, or what consequence that has to the nature and quality of Wikipedia pages. We're not talking about causal mechanisms yet. So how and why are collaborators lost? Is it because they lose trust? Is it because they see an unopaque third party that the owner controls and they don't control? Or is it because something else? That's still ahead of us. And then finally, what are resistance tactics? How do activists in public spheres do something against this? When they are facing malicious bots, they're clearly malicious. The two case studies seem similar, but there are some interesting differences as well. And first is this, is the malevolent versus the beneficial application. It doesn't seem to matter. Both leads to collaboration loss. We also look at two cases where we have collaboration and communication. Maybe that needs to be clarified. We started to look at talk pages and grievance discussions on Wikipedia. And then the question there with the similarities and differences is licensed and hidden bots. Should we have settings where bots can be hidden, can pass as humans, or should they be licensed all the time? And then finally, conceptual takeaways. To me, what was really important is that it's misleading to talk of bots, although I have been talking of bots all the time. It's the algorithmicness of behavior. There's a continuum. It has to be tuned. And even with disruptive bots, there are lots of algorithmic agents that are not clearly bots, but cyborgs. So humans are operating hundreds of automated accounts. And then what happens when you move to a community level from dyads? How robust are communities and how are they reshaping? Maybe they become different, smaller, larger, more diffuse, or more modular. And then finally, we should be looking at content as well. How do civic discussions change? How does the content of Wikipedia pages change when bots are there to edit things? And I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Question right away. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for the great talk. I had a question about your second part, the Wikipedia study. You show consistent loss in collaborations, and I'm wondering whether that may not be as bad as it seems initially. Can it be that some of the menial tasks in coordination are saved, and then this is actually a good sign?
Yes, I think it can be. Again, I think it's a question of what we prefer. Are we fine with losing those collaborations? Was it something tedious or boring or I don't know. So that's still ahead of us. Is this a bad thing? Is it a good thing? What's the causal mechanism? I think it's the next step. Absolutely.
Hey there. So following on from that as someone who wrote some bots back in Wikipedia back in the day and who has done a little bit of work on this, a lot of the work is incredibly tedious and mechanical, running around and doing grammar edits, right? Inserting citations. And the notion of collaboration is just happening to edit the same page on the same day or something is a really weak notion of collaboration, right? So you want to sort of I actually like the idea. I like the theme of your talk a lot, that bots inject into networks and have impacts on them. But you got to be careful about over-interpreting it without actually really looking at the dynamics beyond just the kind of, network analysis that you see, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So we do try to look at what the bots are doing and distinguish that. It's not easy to get data on what exactly the bot is doing on Wikipedia. And we do try to kind of fine-tune and restrict this collaborative sense of what collaboration means beyond just the fact that you have been editing one page together on one day. So we try to see the frequency of that, the kind of the most heavy vein collaborators in that. And we are now looking at top pages as well to see actual communication between users and then see the impact on the top page.
Yeah. So thank you. So we did a paper or study recently on the same thing, looking at subgroup formation in human-robot teams, where we basically show that if humans form a stronger bond with the robot relative to their human teammate, you get these subgroups and some bad things happen. So it's kind of, and we use dyadic measures, network measures. But one question I had was that, so in that scenario, all the cards are on the table, who you're rating. So, but if you go to a higher level, a community level, if we have a community of, let's say, conservatives, and I unleash a conservative bot, that's likely to maybe increase cohesion in that particular community. Whereas if I unleash a bot with a very liberal opinion, everything could change. Right? It could be more, it's all this unknown, right? But in your analysis, it seems like you're treating those bots the same. Well, is there any way that you can take into account that the qualitative nature of these bots, that basically one bot in one community could increase collaboration among humans, and the other one could destroy it by the fact that, the actual context of what the bot and the bot's goal?
I think that's great. Yeah, so we need to look at community context. What I think was trying to get at that was this variable measuring the likes to bots. So I think the fact that there were bots that were not liked was in the context of that particular essential value movement, and it might have been a conservative leading bot, and it might be very, very liked in, I don't know what, MAGA groups or something. But I think that's what we try to do there. So to see, is this a bot that's liked or not? It's malicious here, but maybe seen as a hero, a bot hero in some other context.
Okay.
Thank you, Lionel. Marlon.
Yeah, so thanks for putting these two research contexts together. I want to talk more about Twitter. I typically think that if we just think about the overall platform goals, right? The explosion of bots makes sense where they're striving for user engagement and fresh content, new content. And the similar things happening in Wikipedia. But my question for Twitter, based on your research, what roles are bots playing in that triad? So if we think about social relations, we can imagine things like, the old balance theory where you might be trying to maintain a harmonious relationship between actors, or you may be serving as an advisor to one or information source, whatever. So do you have any thoughts on, other than the behavioral mechanics of what the bot is doing, are they just information disseminators to like-minded individuals? Are they trying to advance an agenda across, some type of ideological line? Do you have any, just any insights so far from their roles?
Exactly. So one thing we try to do is to read tweets, to read what are these bots doing, what's their profile, how do they look like.
I'm particularly excited
and it was really hard to recognize them because they really cast Midwest moms with an interesting basketball and whatnot. So you couldn't see, you could look at it. But then you saw what they do is they, at the right moment, inject the most polarizing content. Like Black Lives Matter, they inject Blue Lives Matter. When it's going really high up. And the balance theory, I really like that. So look at the try it and put balance theory onto it. And most of the failure cases, that would be a negative on the bot exposed person with the bot, because the bot is like manifestly trying to provoke people.
Okay.
So the negative is the spilling over. As we see, if the bot interaction had a negative sentiment, that can spills over into negative sentiment with the human-to-human interaction.
Thank
you.
Full disclosure, I'm not a psychologist, I'm going on a limb here. But it seems to me is that human beings don't like to make an effort. We are basically lazy. Because of that, we all know it, so we appreciate effort. So part of what's going on, at least in human relationship affinity, is we appreciate effort. The bots are not making any effort. And that, to me, seems kind of the disruptor here. We have entities, even if the bot would apologize, you made no effort. Well, I mean, that's why I objected yesterday to put it, even the same notion of trust in human and machine, okay? And so this concept is, they pretend to be humans, but are making no efforts. And you take away the effort, relationships break down. Easy come, easy go. It's an old country song, right?
Yeah, I think that's again something with the why it happens, and I think that's one of the mechanisms, and you're just not there yet. The why questions. That's fascinating. I would love to be there. We are just at the kind of fact checking. Is this happening? Is anything happening?
I think, so first of all, thank you for the presentation. So I think one thing you already answered, so you're planning to also look at the talk pages, because there's a lot actually going on the talk side on Wikipedia and not just on the editing, because it's just I work on open source software. So you're planning to do this now?
We've already looked at talk pages.
Okay. And then since you in the beginning introduced these kind of microstructures, right? So have you considering how particular microstructures have then, seed, so to speak, these cohesive processes over time? Are there certain substructures that matter more? Because, a bot can cycle in to humans, because this is actually the strategy that often kind of trained on, right? Not just try to get as many, but actually maybe you create this circle, because if you want to envelope, opinions, that's just something to think about, because I'm very excited about microstructures. And then about sentiment. So you only looked at sentiment, right? You didn't consider the different emotions. Because, there are 6 major, like if you use the major libraries, that's just from the work I've presented, that you maybe look at that, because that might actually also have an impact. Where they're just always nice, and maybe not so nice, They're very empathetic in the way they talk, yeah.
Great, yeah, I think those are great tensions. Dynamics of microstructures is not always easy.
No.
These bots get deleted. So
Oh, yeah,
I don't see
okay.
them so long. And then people get just fed up, say, okay, no, I'm getting out of here. So people also move. But it would be great to see some kind of dynamics.
True, because it's
also complicated by the flare-ups of discussions.
Yeah, it's very specific, yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
I think just a couple of people ahead of me.
Yeah.
You got a line, so we'll end with Brian.
Thanks for a great talk. If I just wear my physics hat, I just feel like it's whenever I have agents interacting each other, and agents of interactions have a budget, time budget, and resource of interactions. And some other bots are, get in the way, and the interaction decreases because of the time limit of my budgets. Do you think that's the mechanism going on? And the second question is, the following up question is, what is a counterfactual world? So if that's the case, then whenever we have bots get in the way of the interactions among the people, we decrease the interactions, social interactions, because we have some other things to do. Like, no, I have an iPhone, then I don't talk to my friends in person. So what would be the counterfactual world so that we can increase the actual interactions, even if we have the limited budget? The problem is the bots, unlike me, have to sleep, don't sleep. So the problem of the bots in their interactions is they scale unlike human scales. So how can we resolve this issue in a more theoretical way?
That's great. I think those are the problems we're grappling with, just writing advanced proposals and trying to see, well, how can you resist? Is there a specific tech solution, or is it just fighting fire with fire? We talk with civic organizations and say, well, you plan to launch counterbots, good bots? Gee, what happens to our reputation if we're seen contributing to a problem that's already really bad? So, yeah, all those are amazing questions. Time budgets, what happens to the bots? Don't seem to have a time budget, but then again, they navigate deletion on Twitter, so they can pass as humans, and they cannot increase their communication rates. So, yeah, I think those are all absolutely what we're looking at now. Very good question.
And we are coming here.
So methodological question, and then just kind of a general opinion question from you. So I wanted to understand a little bit more when you were differentiating between bots and humans. You said, like grandmas can get on there and act like bots, as well as I'm thinking about social influencers who now, schedule tweets. And I know originally in some of the bot detections, those were getting scooped up. So were the grandmas being classified as bots? Is that what you were saying, or as humans? That's where I just wanted to get kind of a classification, like if you were human acting more bot-like, where were you getting categorized? Or you don't know where they're getting, that's where the method kind of.
Yeah, I think that's, if there are grandmas who are meticulously behave like bots, they will be bots.
Okay.
We just say, well, there's a threshold of 0.5 probability in the deep learning or the random forest, or when we try various methods.
Yeah.
See their agreements, which is not always great, and just say, well, above 0.50, below 0.50.
Okay.
That's humans and bots. I mean, it's very perfect, and then we are trying now to say, well, below 25 and then above 35, and there's a gray area of grandmas or whoever.
Okay.
Cyborgs and influencers, which we get a bracket.
Yeah, those grandmas and influencers, they always just throw things off. Okay, I just wanted to kind of make sure I understood that. And then the second question I have is more just kind of like your opinion, and we kind of go back around, the ultimate implications of this, but do you think there's a tipping point? Do you think there's a bot tipping point? Did we reach it a while ago? Or, because we also talk about how humans, Elon Musk, so I'm just going to continue writing that way. But, at which point these networks become useless?
Yeah.
So, like, for Twitter, do you think we've reached a tipping point? Or do you think there's a specific bot tipping point? I guess is my question. Yeah.
I don't know about tipping points. I think if you just ask me as a network scientist, 50% of actors and 60% of times is way beyond any tipping point. That happens probably in the 10% and 20%.
Yeah, okay.
So we are way beyond any tipping point if you think it was a tipping process. Maybe it's not a tipping process.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens now, I think probably the agenda of the malicious bot operators, like the Russian Internet Agency and so on, is actually go to the 100%, say, no public sphere. You don't get to get discussions and agreements on climate, on racial, gender, anything, because we don't want you to.
Mm-hmm.
We just want you to shut up and just not have meaningful civic discussions.
Okay.
If that's what they want, so we get it. We don't do anything meaningful to defend ourselves.
And now it's only appropriate that Brian gets
I'll
the
be
last
quick.
question,
I
and
will
then
be
we'll
quick.
transition into what we're doing
Yeah.
next.
Look, I really enjoyed the talk. A lot of conceptual richness. A couple of things that came out to me that I think you could add to your list of things to look at. So one of the things that's, really important in human creativity is ideation versus selection. Agnes has written about this. And, obviously on Twitter, there's like a real issue there because the bots are all about ideation. They kind of drive the whole system. So one way to look at that is to start to think about how that works in terms of the broader conceptual issues of human creativity. The other thing I would say is, to me, this feels more like interaction with bots than collaboration. So I wonder if you could speculate for us, given what you've already looked at and your understanding of the system, how do you think things would change or be the same with something like ChatGPT, which really is much more collaborative because you're interacting with it? So, love to hear your point of view on this.
That's great. So the ideation and selection, I think, these bots going to change the way you talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Irritate you into talking in a more agitated way and not a rational discussion. So that's probably is very true. And then in more sophisticated algorithms, we would love to see what happens in the use of ChatGPT in collaborative settings. So when we have teams that some people deploy ChatGPT-based and produce content together. It's really fascinating to see both the collaborations and then the impact on the nature of the contact. But we just don't yet have that data.
I'll share one thing with you. I had an experience the other day that kind of shook me up in class. I had a student comes up and says, I just started using ChatGPT. And ChatGPT told me that the Immaculate Conception was a fable. And I was like, ready to say, what else do you expect? It turned out that the student was outraged by it. For them, it's so complete. I'm sorry? Outraged. Outraged to hear ChatGPT say the Immaculate Conception is a fable. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm just going to let her talk because I'm not sure. And basically, that collaboration with ChatGPT ended that day with that question and that answer. That was it. So, here's a very extreme example of how collaboration with something like that could potentially deepen, but could also be shut down right away.
Yeah, great. That's a great example. It's just literally cannot really shut down.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah. It reminds me, yesterday we had that talk about kind of like the boundaries and how people overcompensate. Well, I think, this is one of the issues with collaboration with bots. If they get too close to the boundary of what you don't consider to be real or not, you overcompensate. And that's it. Until you find a bot that does tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Thank you. Great.
So, thanks.
Thank you so much. I think it's a great note to end a networks conference on Immaculate Conception. So let's give a round of applause. And Ryan, what's next? 15-minute break? Should people grab lunches, come back in here?
I think that's what's on the schedule. We might as well stick to it.
Grab lunches at
Then we have a panel from 11:15 to 12:15.
And that's in here.
It is, and then, thank yous, goodbyes.
Okay. And if people haven't figured out, the restrooms are in that corner.
I'll try that.
Morning.
All right. So we are at the final panel. I have the great pleasure of moderating a panel of distinguished experts who are going to provide some integrative comments and reflect on all of the amazing talks that we've seen today. So first I'll ask them to introduce themselves by way of telling us how they approach this topic of human AI collaboration. So each of you, please, in 30 seconds or less, tell us, introduce yourself and tell us how you approach this task of human AI teaming and future of work.
So I'm Javi Garcia. I'm a neuroscientist and branch chief of the Hybrid Human Technology Intelligence branch, as well as neuroscience and neurotech for the US DevCom Army Research Laboratory. And we've been, I guess, as ARL, right, Army Research Laboratory, we're pretty diverse in the way that we kind of think about human autonomy teaming or human machine teaming. Within the Humans and Complex Systems division, we think of it very much as sort of like a co-pilot and doing any kind of regular task. We're very future focused on future capabilities for the Army. And so we try to facilitate and do research that is integrating in sort of like novel ways that may be missed by other sorts of agencies that are doing similar work. So for Hybrid Human Technology Intelligence, we're basically looking at the sort of unique capabilities of humans and technologies and seeing if there are novel forms of cognition when we kind of integrate technology at different kind of levels of processes in the kind of cognitive domain. Okay. 30 seconds.
Hi, I'm Georgia Chow. I'm an organizational psychologist at the University of South Florida. I do some research on teams, but what I want to share with you today in 30 seconds is basically some of my work on exoskeletons. That's human wearable technology that can augment a user's physical capabilities. And so it's currently pitched as a safety device to prevent back injuries if you're wearing a back exo. But it's also designed to enhance performance. So picking up a 50-pound weight might be experienced as picking up a 5-pound weight instead. So that opens up a lot of doors for more women and for older workers to be able to qualify for physically demanding jobs. But then it's the question of what happens when different kinds of people can really be performing at the same level because of this technology, and how does that affect the overall organization?
Hey, and I'm Dan Cosley. I'm now a permanent person at NSF, so I won't say too much about my own personal research, although I did recommender systems and user modeling with sort of an HCI and CSCW flavor way back in the day. Now I hang out in human-centered computing, which is incredibly broad in terms of how it thinks about relationships between people and technology, from very kind of social implications and social impacts ways to human factors-oriented stuff to sort of sensing and reacting kinds of things to accessibility and related topics. I also hang out with other programs, future work, secure and trustworthy cyberspace, designing accountable software systems, and a couple others where some of the topics that y'all were talking about show up.
Excellent, thank you. So first question for you all. All of the talks that we've seen have tackled really big problems, really big societal problems. And I think it's pretty clear that no single discipline gets to own any of these problems, and we need to work together. So my question for you is, why is interdisciplinarity so hard? And what are some concrete things people in this room can do to encourage interdisciplinarity?
Do we want to do a thing where we just pass?
You can answer in any order.
Cool. So I didn't get the questions memo until like a couple minutes ago, so this is a pretty fresh take. But I mean, we've seen it in some of the ways people have been talking about just your terms are different, right? Fundamental stuff like that, and sort of all the things that we know about people having different sort of, senses of what makes for a really cool intellectual contribution, where can you talk about those things, right? And so there's sort of very practical issues in building these teams. But the problem is if you don't, right, then you wind up just sort of not really understanding what's going on. And so I think one thing that I think, at least in my field in HCI, I think people are a little too confident that like user-centered design and working closely with a group of users is just going to magically solve your expertise gaps, right? Without sort of and it's important to do that, because if you don't talk to them at all, you're also a dumbass. But if you don't work with people who already have expertise in some of the things that you want to connect to, right? You're going to sort of rediscover things, or you're going to do some formative study of something that like the gerontology community knew 25 years ago. And so really sort of seeking out, sort of practically finding people who can complement the things that you want to do, and just being aware that other people care about the same topics that you do from different fields, right? There's a practical version of this at NSF, which is, well, then how do you do this in programs? And that's a hard question, because we have to recruit some set of panelists, and programs have some scope, right? But in HCC, we try to be reasonably broad in terms of how we interpret things and bringing the right people in. You can help with that by sort of being really clear about what the science you're trying to do is, right? Like if I can tell where you're contributing, I can find the right people and I can suggest the right programs. Whereas if you just say, I'm working on something, right? Or you don't put your contributions in context with other things, or you don't say very carefully, hey, I'm using machine learning, but I'm contributing to the understanding of sort of human networks, right? Then it's just really hard for panelists and us to help find the right places to send proposals to and increase your chances of getting funding for it.
I'll share with some of my early experiences. I worked at the General Motors Institute, and the students there were primarily engineers, and my background is in psychology. Trying to teach engineers was hugely difficult for me. And sometimes I would have great insight and understand how they are thinking, but it's not just a matter of learning that and then you're on a higher plane. It goes up and down in terms of my ability to connect with the students and understand where they are coming from. And I don't know how often they could connect with me. I mean, after I lecture about motivation, a student was almost in tears and said, just give me the formula for motivation. I mean, it boiled down to that. And I thought, okay, we're both speaking English, but we're not communicating. And that's why interdisciplinary work is hard. With my EXO project, I am working with biomechanical engineers. And once again, I find myself almost back in the General Motors Institute, trying to understand where they're coming from and where I'm coming from, so they can say, oh, if we're interested in EXO acceptance, just ask them one question. That's all. Why ask them a second question or a third question? Just ask them once and be done with it. And we only have to test 3 people. And so I tear out my hair and I say, no, that's not the way it's going to work, But I think when I served as a program officer, I was a rotator at NSF and the Future Work Program. One of the things that they mandated, in that program is it must be interdisciplinary, so it's hard to work with people outside your discipline, but if a funding agency is going to force it, maybe that's one of the ways that we can do it. And so the EXO project is an NSF future work project, and working with them has been enlightening, and it's really, I think, the only way in which this research can move forward. So like it or not, we have to do it. And if there are ways that are going to nudge us in that direction, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so in my organization, we have a lot of trouble sort of like hiring like in interdisciplinary research, but it is basically a absolute like necessary kind of thing in everything that we do, because we do the foundational research that involves humans and complex systems, right? So it has to do with technology, it has to do with like different contexts, different social kind of domains, all of these things. But then also we have other programs that we need to feed our sort of research to in the more applied setting. So that's where like a lot of the engineering kind of concepts come into. So just to give you like a couple of anecdotes, like, I was a trained visual neuroscientist doing really boring, human visual processing like back in the day. And when I started... I thought it was, I mean, now, so one thing that, the RV has really pushed me in many different directions. So like in, starting like entering the social neuroscience domain, something I didn't really know much about. Like I, partnered with an academic, so went to her lab meetings. Emily Falk is the person, if people know her, really sort of built up sort of my background there. Now I'm sitting in, I was just telling Melissa in Chris Ray's lab, who's computer scientist at Stanford. So we tried to actually, leverage the kind of social aspect of science, because I think that that's pretty core to every collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration and everything.
So the second part of my question was about concrete things that people can do. I noticed you mostly avoided that part because that's the hard part. But Georgia alluded a little bit to sort of being forced to do it by virtue of the Future of Work project. Is there anything else that you can think of that can sort of compel people to be open-minded or have to work together?
Yeah, I think this area just begs for interdisciplinary work. I can't approach EXO use, I can't approach AI, human interactions and networks, without consulting people outside my discipline, and so if you're going to do it right, you have to go and talk to other people.
So let's move on. What are some other themes that you all saw that connected talks across topics or across areas?
Yeah, you start.
Oh, no. I'm the boss. You can't make me.
I'll go over the next one.
Well, okay, I will. Well, I think one thing that stood out to me was the importance of understanding power dynamics and the ways that technologies both reinforce and influence power dynamics, and being very aware of that in both the design and the research phases. A few of the talks explicitly focused on that, like Adam's talk and Melissa's talk, but I think it underlies a lot of the kinds of questions that we're asking, and being aware of what actually causes us to ask that question in the first place, I think is really important.
Yeah, sure. So, and honestly, this is a good exercise probably for thinking about interdisciplinarity too, right? Because trying to put your talk together with someone else's can be kind of interesting, right? And I do this in the small, so there was one thing that came up that I took a note. Oh, right. So someone said that humans are good anomaly detectors, and someone was trying to detect when humans are getting out of abandoned piloting, and someone said, hey, loan officers have a lot of expertise, right? And the idea in the piloting one was that you might want to have the models react to people and learn from that. So I was like, well, why don't we, what if you had clever loans, monitor loan officers who are having conversations or looking at the responses and noticing that they saw something that was wrong even if they didn't articulate it, and use that as learning stuff, right? So that's an incredibly sort of concrete and slightly contrived, but not very contrived. That I actually put all that together as the talks were going to try to think about it, right? And so that's sort of a nice sort of exercise. Or like the question that Brian asked about, hey, how can we think about AI systems disrupting these skill networks? Could that even mean something for the way one might want to design AI systems by thinking about sort of sub-skills and kind of a Minsky society of mind way up a couple of layers, right? So there's very concrete kinds of things you can think about this. A couple of the most general themes that I saw, I mean, I'd say the most fundamental theme was sort of thinking about AI's effects at levels above the individual here, right? So a lot of people said, well, we mostly think about sort of, AI and a worker, right? Rather than AI and work, or AI and organizations, or AI and society. And I actually think that's in this group, a little less true, in the CSCW world, also a little less true. But I think on balance, there's very little attention beyond, what can the AI do, or what can the AI do in the context of this person or this conversation? And although there's lots of big talk about, social responsibility, blah, 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 right? We don't seem to see it sort of migrating very much into the way we think about designing or, putting boundaries around or regulating the stuff as people have talked about. So that's one theme. I've got more, but I don't want to dominate, so I'll pass.
I think one other theme is how the human AI interaction, or that network, really influences softer issues, the psychological issues. How do we really relate to AI? And not only that, but how do I relate to other people, given that there is AI augmenting some of my work that I do. So that opens up a lot of doors. And just to tag on to what Dan said in terms of taking it up to not just the individual level, but also the dyadic, the team, and organizational implications. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I guess kind of following up on that, definitely, I appreciated sort of all of the different scales, from the, let's say, dyadic sort of interactions that Paul Scheide, mentioned, affecting, to the organization, to societal, and everything. What I think is, a rich avenue of research is, of course, connecting all of these sort of different scales. Another thing would be sort of the physical constraints or opportunities of each one of these systems, whether it's technology or humans. We have, capacity on information processing, kind of generally our memories and everything. These are various constraints that lead to, our various kind of cognitive properties. Technology has, some similar, but a lot of very complementary, fast speed, dissemination, all of these things. So just kind of really thinking about how do you uniquely kind of merge them or protect them from different things? Yeah.
Great. So related to common themes, multiple speakers demonstrated very effectively that technology is not the problem and humans are not the problem. but in fact, the systems that we're embedded in, like for example, neoliberal U.S. policy, are the problem and have led us to this place. And so, can you comment on how that kind of perspective might change the way that we approach research questions or research more generally? The systems perspective. Do you want me to ask the audience instead?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
I recently came across this notion of a Turing trap. I think one of the person who actually mentioned it, not here, but the publication, the recent publication, Turing test is the one that actually drove the technology in a way that substitute a human. Because we are testing, we're testing whether this technology is good or bad by testing whether this technology is going to be human-like or not. That's actually destined to substitute our capability instead of augmenting and complementing the limited capacity. Again, technology is infinite of their capability as well as this amount of resource or scalability. So it's wouldn't it be better that we can shape and try to find the research direction so that we can actually make not in the trap of this Turing test, but in the trap of more, I don't know, better basin of attractor of this dynamics.
Thank you. Any other comments, Sabine?
Yeah, there's this question of what systems want to do versus what they. I was going to hand it, but you can do that one. Versus what we want them to do versus what we can do. Right? Malte was talking to me about this, how we tend to approach problems from what we already know and what we already are doing and what we can already see instead of thinking about, okay, what's the new part of it?
Thanks, Sabine.
Maybe a bit linked to your discussion on interdisciplinarity, because I believe that we need to think about augmenting rather than substituting. And, we have now people from the AI world teaming up with social scientists thinking about that. But then actually when it comes to control, etc., we need to include also the engineers that work on very different topics as well. And controls that are also not connected to AI and machine learning right now. So, who do you think should be around the table when we do such research?
I almost want to say everybody is the short answer, but as an organizational psychologist, I was brought on this EXO project because the biomechanical engineers discovered that a lot of people don't want to use the exos, even though they're designed to help protect your body and reduce any kind of back strain, muscle strain. Men in particular think that, yes, I can power through this. And if it's designed for women and old people, well, then I don't want to be perceived as someone who needs that kind of technology. And so, wow, that's a psychological issue, and so, yeah, it begs for interdisciplinary work, but it also sheds, light on how can we solve a larger problem, these unintended consequences that they saw required expertise outside their area.
I would add on to that if anyone else has something. So this question of social responsibility and ethics and envisioning consequences of things, this is also something I'd say that on balance, and I say this as a card-carrying techno-optimist computer science person, right, we do not have very good methods for that, and the methods we do have don't get used, right, in real contexts and real design contexts. And so I think some more thought about, is there something about the methods that make them unusable? Is it really just fiscal incentives for companies? Is it training of engineers somehow and computer scientists and other ethical technologists, right? That's kind of an important question, I think, that we should grapple with. And it applies to a lot of the work here, too. There are ethical considerations and I'm also a nudger from way back, right? SuggestBot was a nudge to try to get people to edit more stuff on Wikipedia, but it has costs, too.
I have a question. How do we expect to solve how we fit AI into society given that we need publics for that and we need organizations for that. And our publics are teaming with bots already, and who has a say and who has one word is not clear. And then in terms of organizations, we are so reliant on platforms and their logics of operating, deflecting accountability, changing the rules of the game all the time. So how can we think to solve the problem of AI, bracketing both publics and platform organizations?
And if I can elaborate on that question too, I think throughout the talks, we haven't adequately considered what the role of the government is and what should the government be doing or not doing. And so if you can combine these two ideas in your responses, what could the government be doing? What are our options here?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I mean, what's that? Yeah.
We need an educated Congress.
Yeah.
We need an educated populace to elect people who are educated. That's a problem.
Oh, is it that simple?
Okay,
we'll come to you in a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Just a thought on this.
Yeah, no, I was just I just read James Bridle's Ways of Being Towards Planetary Intelligence, and his solution is like, if we had like a collective intelligence that really prioritized like the public good, but across the entire planet, like it would be a better place, right? So that's the sort of, whole goal, right? If there weren't wars and all of these other things, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, depends on what you mean by government, right? So, like, what can NSF do? Well, we don't set a lot of policy, right? We don't regulate a lot of stuff. We do set some policy for the research community in terms of how we ask them to ask for things and the kinds of things we prioritize. That's one thing we can do a little bit of, right? We can, like our EWF group in SCIES has done a lot of work to try to get the SCIES community to think more about broadening participation with limited but maybe some success. And there are other places at NSF that do that stuff as well, right? I mean, there have been calls. So someone yesterday mentioned a Stanford group, and there was also a ACM group that released a shockingly similar paper about the same year around sort of the encouraging people to think about possible negative unintended consequences in reviewing processes, right? But that requires both the places that establish those reviewing processes and the community to take them seriously, right? And so that means, right, that if you want this as an academic and as a reviewer, you should talk about it in your reviews and condition at least some of your decision making on things like that, right? That's not an exact answer because I can't speak for the DOE. I will say one thing about Congress. Remember, Congress, like 90% that comes out of it is congressional staff, right? It means that it's not just electing congressmen, it's trying to come up with sort of a good mechanism for bringing knowledgeable people into government who can help with the policy making.
There is actually some movement in that area. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's been
Yeah, because that question was also thrown at me, are they going to abuse it? I like that idea, NSF actually, at least supporting it. There are two questions for me. Basically, to which extent can we as researchers work in settings where we can actually develop algorithms that are good? Because sometimes the data and the environments are controlled by companies. Right. So is there a way to get actually support and infrastructures that we as researchers have access to do the good AI rather than relying on things that are developed by companies or data? Because that's, we don't use Twitter, Wikipedia, but there's things you can't control there, right? And then we have limited resources. And the second thing is, educationally, do we need educational programs to make us aware? Like, we're not just talking about digital literacy, we talk about AI literacy, talk about that kind of literacy that we need to build in our educational programs.
Those are hard questions, and and I think the answers are beyond just looking at educational curricula, or looking at how can we get organizations to share some of their data? I mean, all of that is, the organization side is based on still companies are trying to maximize shareholder value. You know, company success is defined by productivity or efficiency. And maybe we need different ways to define organizational success that would dramatically change civilization. And I don't have the brain power to go that way, you know, but I think that's just the way that this planet is now challenged with climate change issues. We're being challenged with AI issues, and the consequences can be catastrophic. But we have to change. I mean, we have to hope for the better, or we're doomed.
So the suggestion that, you know, we can change our behavior to embed ourselves in those institutions, I think is really important. Like, researchers can go work with the government, they can work with organizations, and this is potentially a way to accomplish some of these goals. Along these lines, I'm curious from you, and then I'll come to the audience next too. What are some things that you wished you would have heard more about today? And Sabine's comment about workforce development is, I think, really interesting. It's not just education, but, you know, thinking about workforce development broadly and what are the implications for our research on workforce development. I personally also would have loved to hear more about how people and AI learn from each other over time, and just focusing on learning more generally. But I'll turn it to you. So what are the things you would have loved to hear even more about?
I'd like to hear more about how generative AI can affect job performance across workers. You know, so there's some research that shows that it can enhance or augment the ability of top performers to be even better. So it's like the rich get richer kind of analogy. And that would increase the variability in performance across workers. And then how do you try to motivate and incentivize them and reward them? There's other AI that really compresses the performance variability in terms of some of the work that Brynjolfsson, I think is his name, at Stanford, presents AI augmented help for call centers and the work that they do. And so they help people dealing with customers in terms of really improving the lower level people, bringing them up to higher levels of performance with the AI augmentation. AI doesn't help too much at the top end because they're already at the top end. You know, so we're compressing the performance variability. And then how do you deal with, how does an organization manage those people? I think those are interesting questions that can be addressed. And some people even argue the machine learning on trying to capture that tacit knowledge of high performers. Should those high performers be rewarded for that contribution? You know, when AI tries to mimic artwork, you know, from Picasso or Monet, well, they're dead. They can't get a cut of that action. But for, yeah, Beyonce, yes, exactly. Should she get a cut from her passive participation, I suppose, in this kind of AI? And maybe the answer is yes, but then how would you develop the kinds of processes to make that a fair system? Don't know.
Oh, you want to go first? I feel like I've said more stuff. Oh, sure. Yeah, so one of the sort of like big problems that the Army has kind of talked to us a lot about is sort of like, you know, distributed sort of like command centers that are really solving like a really complex problem, right? Courses of action and everything else. So in like 20, 30 years, right, everything's going to be distributed, vulnerable. And how do you basically optimize sort of like the tasks and subtasks of a really complex problem that can take like weeks to solve up into something pretty minimal by like, let's say, 100 times faster than what we did before. So that it would require like essentially this taking this hierarchical structure, integrating technology into sort of like unique ways, understanding and sensing sort of like everything around you, as well as like the contextual kind of stuff, which involves everything from what's going on in Twitter to whether it's raining. So these sorts of complex problems have been on my mind. So that's what
I will take it. So it's always dangerous as an NSF person to say things that you think you want, because then people are like, oh, well, let's do that, right? And so I'm not going to say topically things that I want. I will say to the ChatGPT thing that just like when I work with secure and trustworthy cyberspace, and in 2018 we got this giant bolus of terrible proposals on adversarial machine learning because somebody put some tape on a stop sign and realized it would have social consequences if our machine learning algorithms were broken, right? And those proposals were terrible, but they've gotten better, and I fully expect that to be the case with ChatGPT and generative AI as well, in areas from human AI teaming to misinformation, right? But that's not what I want, right? Those will come. I can't even stop them, right? The thing that I would like in the general, though, is that there's this tension between wanting to say big things, AI, algorithms, platforms, crowdsourcing, right? Privacy, marginalization. And the reality that those things are big, complicated things that you have to take tiny bites out of, right? And so what I want is the community to be really circumspect about the levels of abstraction at which it is really contributing at, and thinking about methods, whether they're theoretical frameworks or design guidelines or whatever your community's favorite ways of representing sort of, intellectual tools for managing abstractions are. I want more of that, right? I want to see a story at a high level about AI and its impacts on social work, backed up by case studies of different forms of AI, that there's something interesting in common between them, right? I want to see hypotheses about, well, bots change behavior in networks and it's stupid to ignore them, and then let's look at all these case examples and try to extract, right? And as my comment on yours said, I won't buy every specific thing that happens immediately, but that's the right way, I think, to do these things. I would love to see more of that in research papers and in proposals and just in how we talk to each other. Sorry, rant off.
That was amazing. I want to ask the audience too, what are some of the themes that you think have been underexplored? And I also want to remind you that in a room like this, all the voices are important. So if you haven't had a chance to speak yet, this is coming up on your last chance to do so. So be thinking about, what are those underexplored themes, and please do put your hand up.
I've spoken a few times. I'm willing to make an exception for you. So I really felt very strongly about George's comments that we didn't talk enough about generative AI. And I'll tell you why. I got started in AI like 10 years ago in a consulting project. And for the last 10 years, the one bastion of safety for human beings was their creativity and ability to innovate. And 2 weeks ago, I felt that there was a watershed event that totally blew my mind and told me that that was no longer true. And I don't know how many of you followed this, but it had to do with fake Drake. Yeah. So if you don't know who Drake is like one of the top 3 musicians in the world, very, very popular. He's got a unique style, a unique voice. And some people using AI decided to create a fake Drake. And it wrote the entire song with his voice, his intonation, his style, the rhythms that he uses. They wrote the lyrics for it. And guess what? People thought it was really Drake. And in like 3 days, it had 3 million listens, which is an enormous amount. Then it came out that it was fake Drake. And then people were like, well, I don't care if it's fake Drake. I like fake Drake better than Drake. And then like 3 days after that, Paul McCartney, I don't know if you know this name, he was a Beatle. He's 83 years old. He's still active. He comes out with a new song. And then some people with AI took one of the verses that he sang with his 83-year-old voice and filled it in with his 23-year-old voice when he was a Beatle. People are like, oh, I like that better than just Paul McCartney. Then someone else came along, like 3 days after that, and added to that, and they add in John Lennon's voice. And John Lennon has been dead since 1980 because they wanted to have that harmony between McCartney and Lennon. Then it comes to the artists. And some of the artists said, I love it. I absolutely love it. Do you know why they say they love it? Because now they could work for 3 years, get their style, and then they could live forever with a machine doing all their work for them and never have to come up with anything again. That's pretty interesting when you think about it. And then the labels who own the artists, literally, were like, well, maybe I don't need an artist. I just need them for a 3-year contract to get their sound, and I'll just make all the music I want. And then Spotify came along 3 days after that and said, do you know what? I don't need music labels, and I don't need artists. I own the distribution channels, and I'm going to have my own AI, and I'm going to have my own stuff. And then in the end, I'm going to put Madonna together with, like, I don't know, Little Richard, which has never been done. They'll have a baby, and we'll have new music.
She's keeping her baby.
Yeah. So my question to you as individuals looking out over this terrain, I see this as an absolute microcosm of where we're going, because almost every industry has the creative artists. You had this in some of your triads. You have the people who own the creative artists, and then you have distribution channels. And those were 3 different areas that you needed to put together a single profitable business. With AI, you no longer need 3 things. And so I'm curious from you, from a point of view of research, do you have any sense at this point what you would like to see known about this system right now that we should have research on to help inform people in the future?
Excellent. Why don't you take a stab at that? I'm going to wander around the audience in case I inspire anybody.
Okay. Wow. I'm thinking, I think recently Tom Hanks said, I believe I'm going to be acting in movies long after I'm dead, because AI is going to make that happen. And then there's legal questions on, well, who's going to get the charge?
I looked into the legal questions. It's pretty interesting. For decades, performers have had impersonators. Like literally, an impersonator. I could sound just like Tom
Rich
Hanks.
Little, yeah.
They never pay a royalty to Tom Hanks. Impersonators are free to impersonate anybody they want, never pay any royalties to them. So chances are the law is going to pretty much stick to stare decisis, and then where are we with that?
This is the dangerous part, and we need safeguards.
Do you anyone else want to comment on Brian's question?
Super quick, right? From a kind of, again, a SATSI point of view, things like deepfakes and misinformation and stuff are a clear place where we need to be thinking about these things.
Okay, thank you.
And then personally, I'm super excited about that. Like, I think that it leads to innovation in a different art form, like from a music standpoint. Yeah. The limits of that, though, I don't know. Like, or at least like the temporal progression of that innovation, I would love to know. Yeah.
But think about like if Paul McCartney is 23 years old and he puts out 3 Beatle albums, and he's like, at this point, I'm just going to let my robot do it. We might never have had all the great artistic achievement that came after those first 3 years. Like, to me, that's a tremendous loss. Like, you put a dent in human creativity with Don.
Well, I mean, but was his motivation only money? Or was it actually creating art,
I think most creative artists have an underlying fear, which is, I'm going to run out of gas in the tank. And this is something that they like.
Most academics, too.
Yes.
We have a question from Diego.
So, given this comment.
I wanted to comment on this, but anyways, no, go ahead.
We'll have time at the end for comments.
Okay. Sorry, very quickly. It's just like, I know there is a huge push about generative AI, but a little bit like connected to Sabine's questions, like all of this right now belongs to all these companies, OpenAI, etc., which basically any kind of project is based on an API connected to ChatGPT, whatever. So like, it's just like a huge dependence on this knowledge that I think we don't have here. I mean, building this generative AI really belongs to specific groups or companies. So in that sense, like what should we expect? Like, are we going to make that generative AI or just be observants of all of this?
Or maybe like the weather system, right? Like each government has their own sort of like generative model of of all of the text within that country, and then yeah, basically each of your local kind of entities kind of use it in different ways collaboratively. Yeah.
I mean, NSF funds research more than infrastructure, but there are infrastructure programs, right? We funded something out of Northeastern, I think, called the Internet Observatory that's trying to deal with a little bit of this in terms of data collection and observing how people use the internet. One could imagine asking the MRI2 program to fund a $50 to $100 million instrument, which is basically a community-run LLM or family of LLMs. I don't know whether you get it funded, but this is how people in physics think about things a little more. What are the big things we need as a community, and how can we go about getting them, right? But somebody has to be willing to build the telescope, right? That has to be their life, right? It has to be their research life. And so I don't know if a lot of us are willing to build the telescope.
In relation to Brian's comment about impersonators, if I am impersonating Tom Hanks, everybody would know I'm not really Tom Hanks. But if I create an AI that uses his likeness, then I think there's going to be a legal issue. Drake is probably suing or trying to get some kind of compensation for the fake Drake. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. And so I think it might be like a cat and mouse game in terms of we're going to have to research and find ways to out these counterfeits or these fakes. And then they're going to have to counter and try to do that. But we need something even higher than just the cat and mouse, fixes and get workarounds to try to put us in a situation where we can address the greater good as opposed to good is evil, greed is good.
Yeah, so actually it was a comment going back to what Brian started doing, I guess your question, and that is GPT. Yeah, and the research community. Science is science when it publishes. So there's a whole, industry and infrastructure for curating what is science and preserving it. And certainly any of these generative mechanisms can interfere in that process. So now scientific publishers are having to think about what's our policy going to be about the use of these kind of AI tools in the research process, generating ideas, and more importantly, at the moment, at least the consideration is around helping to write the document. And I don't pretend to know the whole landscape, but some publishers are simply saying it cannot be used at all, and we're going to have to make researchers attest to that as an ethical issue. Others where it could be, but you have to declare and maybe make it transparent to the entire review process. So it's not just celebrities out there. We could be targets too, or we can be wrapped up in this as well. I wonder what the panel thinks about that.
Panel?
I can throw something if nobody has anything. I'll pull this back to, I don't know what to say about the research community as a whole. I think NSF, as people inside of NSF have been like, well, what happens if, somebody does a review with it, or we start getting 80 trillion proposals written by it, and those things would be terrible, I think. And even using ChatGPT to help with a review also would be bad, because that means probably you're feeding a proposal to ChatGPT, right? That would be hideous breaches of confidentiality. But I do think it raises, going back to Brian's question about what are kinds of research questions that might be useful here, right? One is, how can we take what we already know about how people sort of use and adopt technologies, right, to think about how they're going to treat ChatGPT, right? Is it going to be an oracle? Is it going to be an assistant? Is it going to be distrusted? When and how and why and for what tasks and by whom, right? And then more sort of going to the kind of, human AI, not interaction. What was the word you said yesterday? Integration, right. So human AI integration, in the sense of there are things that you could probably use ChatGPT generative models to do. to make your life a lot easier, right? As long as you do them in sort of thoughtful, responsible ways that carry out the kind of goals that you have in doing those things, right? And so I think some research on that wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Oh, wow. Let me tag on to that. So here's an interesting issue in terms of when these call center people were using AI augmentation to help them deal more effectively with customers. They found that the high performers were not using that at first because they're high performers. They already know how to deal with customers. But after a while, they started using it because it was easier. It's easier to press the button and send a prepared message than to compose it all yourself. And someone was saying, I think Lionel, when I'm brain dead, I would just rather push the button and send a pre-prepared message. And so I don't know if that's going to degrade the top performers if they have this AI augmentation that would be good enough. And so maybe it's another unintended consequence, but we have to perhaps look at that.
I mean, I think it should be like completely and fully embraced in every like sort of like aspect. I think it like for certain individuals that may have like difficulty sort of like generating their own text, like in scientific writing or something. I've one postdoc who generally struggles with that, but his creativity in analysis, in implementing and everything else, like would without this tool, right, may be sort of like left behind and not added to like the general kind of society and all of this sort of impact that he can do, because everything is very text-based, like what we do. Yeah. So I think also like there's a lot of opportunities like in scientific writing and creativity here too, because having like an entity that just like makes associations between all of these like really abstract, sort of constructs, whatever it is, we would be able to extract some sort of like almost like creativity score or like direction of divergent thinking or something from some idea that you can produce. So in a collaborative kind of setting, it seems like, well, maybe I'm optimistic about, innovation and everything else, but.
Great, we have a question back here.
I really like the example of like physics versus, I guess, computer science, in the sense that when you think about CERN, these are like big like governmental agencies doing the best physics research, whereas a lot of the best research that comes out of like, say, computational social science comes out of private companies now. So I had a question for like, in terms of when weighing grant funding, are there any internal guidelines that weigh like this, how much will this impact like public good versus private good? A lot of these are like, private organizations trying to optimize, and so one, what are the existing internal guidelines? And second, how do you think they will be modified for the context of artificial intelligence?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I got distracted for a second.
That was my bad.
Yeah, sure. So how does NSF think? Okay, so the party line, right, is that NSF has intellectual merit and broader impacts. And broader impacts are supposed to think about things like what is the good or possible harm for society, right? In practice, that gets thought about at several different levels. Panelists talk about it or not, right? And too often, not very much, in my opinion, right? And so that gets downweighted a little bit in the discussions of it. Panelists also sometimes say, is this something that, companies should be funding instead of NSF? And occasionally we say that inside of NSF too, right? We think about this a little bit, right? But in general, if the science needs to be done, and it's reasonably good science, and the panel and the program officers don't sort of see compelling reasons why it shouldn't be done, right, it'll probably get funded if there's enough money relative to other good stuff, right? And so there's a question, well, should we change those processes in some way? Should we be much more intentional and explicit about the relationship between scientific funding and social impact. And I think the new TIP directorate is trying to do a little bit of that kind of work, although they aren't actually getting any real money from Congress, right? So that makes them not able to do as many things as they've wanted to do yet. Even though they could, in principle, get billions of dollars, Congress actually has to appropriate the money. I don't know that this is a very satisfying answer to your question, but it is sort of the best answer that I have from where I sit in NSF as a program officer, not like a leadership muckety-muck.
Do you want to take the next question, or do you want to collaborate?
No, I mean, ethics, like at least for, DevCom ARL, like we certainly, like as scientists, have this pretty regularly. And, often there are like sort of new ideas or something that are thrown at us. We always have to consider like adversarial advantage and everything like that. So we do like at least think through the adversarial kind of domain. Now, ethics, and the technology, future technology being in the basic sciences, like becomes a little murky and hard to kind of predict, but it's certainly a conversation. I wish that there was more across all of, DevCom.
We've got 2 minutes left, so quick question.
Yeah, I'd like to read a tweet by, I believe it's the real Daniel Dennett, from today. Companies using AI to generate fake people are committing an immoral act of vandalism and should be held liable. It's part of his quoting from his own Atlantic article about the whole effort to create fake people. Many in the AI community these days are so eager to exploit their new powers, they have lost track of the moral obligations. So you can go back and look all the way back to Turing in 1950. We fell in love with the idea, let's create fake people. And we kind of now take it for granted. So much of the talks here, well, fake people are here, what's happening with them? But maybe we need to stand back and say, is this a moral thing? Are we in a moral pursuit, or are we in an immoral pursuit?
Comments on morality?
By fake people, like, are we talking very generally? Like, let's say trying to, like, similar to her question.
They don't have to identify them to behave like humans. We're trying to make them more social. They don't have there's no legal obligation to identify themselves. In some of the Asimov stories, it was R something, R Daniel. You had to identify yourself as a robot. I mean, of course, it was part of the novelistic trope, but you have to identify. Here we have entities that behave like human, better and better at this. They don't identify. They don't even have to say I'm a fake person. And now we are saying, okay, well, how is it going to affect us? And you should read Daniel's article where he's saying, not in a very good way.
So I have a very bold and maybe crazy idea here. So given that we've talked about the AI a lot and ChatGPT, and it's true, like recent findings and also consistent with my experience that the AI and all these large language models and kind of the artificial intelligence is driven by industry rather than science and academia. Because of this, like data, big data is available. That only the academia. When someone says like no data is not available for training, and also like large computers, it's not available for us. Now that it actually remind me of this gene sequencing in the back then when the biotech was rising, and it's worried about how this is going to be driven by industry, then it's going to actually misuse and exploit it. Now we have an NIH, and I was wondering whether the government needs to have kind of NSF equivalent for the AI funding.
I love that idea, and it's a great question to end on. So given we're at the end of our panel, maybe you could just say 1 or 2 sentences about this idea or whether you're inspired.
And if I understand it correctly, like it's essentially like let's say one proposal would be like every company has to release all of their data so that everybody can do the research
or the NIH equivalent AI for AI.
Right.
Funding funding of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be.
Science of AI, for example.
putting on my army hat here for a second, I think that it would be really great, sort of like, foster a lot of like really kind of creative solutions, lots of great research and everything like that. But it would also leave us extremely vulnerable for our adversaries to take advantage of that fully, build like perfect models, of every individual and all that stuff. So that's immediately what came to mind.
I also think yesterday we saw a slide of Pandora's box, a big monster coming out. Actually, I thought the story of Pandora was hundreds or thousands of the evils were released. And maybe that's where we are today. And you can't catch them all back. But future research is going to have to maybe be constrained by certain boundaries or certain, was it Asimov who had the 3 laws of robotics? Yeah, they can do no harm, and maybe our future research has to consider those kinds of moral standards.
Yeah, I was struck by that picture because wow, that's a really ugly version of Hope there. So I don't know if you're proposing that there needs to be like a whole new agency.
Agents that can help us to regulate the development of the AI rather than driven by the profit-driven the technology advancement.
Yeah, I guess I just don't know enough about how NIH regulates health to have strong opinions on that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, it's a sign of a great panel that we could go on for hours and hours, but we are at our end, so please join me in thanking the panelists.
Hey, everybody. Marlon and I are going to do a little wrap up. It's just going to take us 1 minute to get set up. We'll be right back with you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. We're coming to close. I got a little tear in my eye. It's been such fun working with everybody. And Marlon and I are going to tag team. I just like to show appreciation to a number of people who are here and help make everything possible. And then he's going to follow up with remarks on what his impressions have been over the last couple of days, what he's learned and what he's going to take away. The other thing I want to mention is that Paul Leonardi really should be up here with us, but he told me to tell you he had better things to do, so he just wants me to thank you on his behalf. So,
why don't you tell him what he's doing?
He's working for NAS.
That won't surprise anybody.
Seriously. Now she's getting a little on the side for all of this. So first things first, I really want to thank Janet, and I really want to thank Peter for, in a lot of ways, making this possible. When I look around and I think about the things we saw last night, the two of you are really the common denominator for all of this. You really saw this early on. You got it started. You put the energy behind it. And, I was struck by something, and it reminded me of something last night about my relationship with you, Peter, and you, Janet, before I ever met the two of you. I was so struck by the warmth and really the love that those videos showed towards the two of you. And when I was in graduate school, I read a book called Humans in the Universe. It has nothing to do with AI. But it was on mentorship. And I don't know if you know this, Dan, but in the 1980s, NSF sends around a survey to 3,000 scientists saying, what do you consider the single most important thing in your success as a scientist? And what they said was an expert and caring mentor. And I've always thought about the two of you like that. And, it's no small thing, actually. You could look through the history of science, and mentors have played a big role. So, like Socrates had a student who was Plato. And then Plato goes blind. He's not taking any more students. He just can't handle it. And one student comes and makes this really impassioned argument for being Plato's student. Do you know who that was? That was Aristotle. And then Aristotle takes on a student. Do you know who that was?
No.
That was Alexander the Great. So mentorship makes a really, really big deal. And before I ever met the two of you and talking to your students, you were my role model to be a mentor. So I want to thank you for that. that can be long beyond your reach of your ideas and your work and the people that you represent. So thank you. The other thing is, behind the scenes of all of this, there's a lot of people that do a tremendous amount of work. Nash and I refer to them as our second, third, fourth, and fifth brains, because we just can't keep up with it all. And that's really the staff who's done so much for us. And just to show our appreciation, we'd like to give each of them a gift. And first, I'd like to invite up Andy Jopi. Second person I'd like to thank is Marsha Hilliard. Emily Rossman. And Mia Politsky. And there's one other person who couldn't be here today, Dorothea Boyle. So one applause for Dorothea as well. Thank you very, very much. And with that, I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Mom.
Yeah, so to extend the thank yous, as part of the co-organizing team, would also like to show our appreciation to some of the USC people, Lindsey Young, straight back, our great RAs. For those who have not had a chance to meet them yet, Alex Alvarado, Eugene Lee, Maddie Huang Isherwood, and then also Jasmine Wu here from Northwestern. They did a bulk of the scheduling and coordination and emailing. I made my life easier, so thanks to all the graduate students. Yeah, so just to close us out, I did prepare remarks, but who needs them? This was a lot of fun, as you all know. I would say back in 2019 in Los Angeles, Peter and Janet told us that we were going to get ready to go to Evanston in early 2020 to do a workshop on human AI networks. And we were thinking, okay, why are we going to be doing that? And then it got canceled, unfortunately. And within the past 7 months, we've seen how really visionary that idea was, right? To have the foresight to anticipate that humans and technology are going to be cooperating, collaborating, and competing with one another in very real and unique ways pretty soon. And even this workshop happening post-ChatGPT, we've been really fortunate to have people who have dedicated the better part of a decade or the better parts of their careers to think about how awareness is being affected by AI, how robots can be integrating different human emotions and how they can influence our relationships. All of these concepts that help us better understand how technology is enriching and changing the lived human experience is a super interesting privilege to be a part of. And the main element that makes this possible is interdisciplinarity. And I think it's something a lot of us in the room take for granted. So Peter and Janet, they're not afraid to engage with different fields theories, right? A lot of us in the room are not afraid to use multiple different methods from the sciences, even for social science inquiry. Brian went from ethnography to, what are you doing these days? Big data Brian, right? So it's all kinds of focus on questions. And this is a very special group for being open-minded, flexible, fluid in the ways that we think about research and the willingness to learn and grow. And so it goes without saying, but for some of you that have not been to one of these before, be sure to keep in touch. We're going to catch up pretty soon, I'm sure, at different conferences, whether it's the big flagships or smaller kind of workshops like this. But we're new friends, old friends reconnecting, probably future collaborators as well, and all in the context of better understanding what artificial intelligence will do with us, for us, and to us over the coming years. So thank you all for coming out to Evanston and for sticking with us for the whole thing. And get out of here. No, but, safe travels back to wherever we'll be going. So thank you all.